everybody, welcome to another episode of Purple Insider presented by FanDuel. Matthew Coller here, and we got lots going on the show tonight. So first, the Minnesota Vikings did practice at TCO Performance Center, but it was only in shells, and I would say it was about 67% speed, so I didn't track all of Kyler Murray's passes today. I thought that would be pretty unfair when it wasn't a real hardcore practice. We should get one tomorrow and have a lot more to report on how different guys looked, although there's only 2 more open practices, then there's a final preseason game, then it's cut downs, and then off we go to the regular season. So I'll report on what that looked like yesterday, but tomorrow, but there is an important note, which is that third round draft pick Jakobe Thomas was back at practice today for the Vikings, and he's been doing stuff off to the side, but has not been fully participating on 11-on-11s or 7-on-7s for quite some time, for several weeks. And we've seen, a couple of different injuries here at the safety position, including Theo Jackson was not practicing today. He got banged up in the second day of the joint practices, so they are still short a bit at that safety position. We saw a lot of Jakobe Thomas again today at that position, and Jakobe Thomas. It's going to get confusing when they both make the roster. But Jakobe Thomas was out there quite a bit. He has performed very well for the Vikings and has become a clear Mr. Mankato candidate, but also a guy that could potentially contribute right away. And we'll find out, I'm sure, by the end of the week what is happening with Theo Jackson. It didn't look serious when he got banged up, but the fact that he was not practicing today is notable, and the fact that Jakobe Thomas is back maybe opens the door for him getting some playing time on Friday when they go up against the Denver Broncos, and that's good news for him to not have to miss any time, just some in training camp. Maybe it sets him back a little bit, but not have to miss time at the beginning of the season. And before he was hurt, he was looking like he was getting it during the early parts of training camp, working mostly with the second team, but he's a big guy. He moves very well, and it looks like they were trying to train him to be the guy who does a lot of communicating on the defense. So getting him back is a plus. And the only other thing I noticed was that Carson Wentz was getting some reps today with the second unit, but how many he took versus McCarthy, I'm not entirely sure, but I think that conversation is still on the table about who is going to be QB2. So we'll be watching pretty closely as we go tomorrow. And I know that McCarthy was also banged up in the game, so maybe that played into it a little bit, and we'll hear from O'Connell before the week's end. But that's really it. I can't tell you who played well today when they're not playing at full speed. So instead, we have a 53-man roster projection. I've been pouring sweat. I've been drinking Diet Dr. Pepper, staying up 24 hours, working out every single detail. And finally, I think that I have pinned down 53. And hopefully I counted correctly this time, unlike the first time we did the 53 where I think I had 54. So anyway, let's fire it up. We will begin, of course, with the quarterback position, and I think that J.J. McCarthy is still going to be here. It'll be McCarthy, Carson Wentz, and the starter, Kyler Murray. Now, I put it in order. This is not a depth chart projection, but I put it in order: Murray, Wentz, and McCarthy. I don't know if that's going to be the case. Truly, I can't get inside Kevin O'Connell's head and know whether he's going to trust J.J. McCarthy to run the offense, because that's what it is really about. Both guys are going to have some inaccuracies. Sometimes we make it seem like just because Carson Wentz gets the ball out quickly that he's like pinpoint out there. He has not been in preseason, nor has he been in training camp when he's gotten reps. But you do know that Wentz is going to mostly get the football to his receivers, understand the offense, know how to run things out there. So it will come down to the trust level for McCarthy. And do they weigh what's happened in preseason into that mix? We have ascertained, I think, over the years that Kevin O'Connell's his emphasis on the preseason is not that much for guys who play with the first and second team. He tries to have as few of them play as humanly possible. So how much does it matter that he missed those throws in the preseason game against the Ravens, or that he overthrew a receiver to start the game against the New York Giants? it's probably going to weigh much heavier what he did in the joint practices, what he did throughout the entire training camp, and how confident he is at the line of scrimmage, the timing of the offense, and all those things will go into it, because were Kyler Murray to get hurt, you would have to trust who is going to be the next man up. And I think that Max Brosmer will be on the practice squad. I think they really like Max Brosmer. I know that, now it's become sort of a little bit meme-ish with what happened in the games last year, and then, he didn't have a great performance the other day. But Brosmer knows the offense really well. I think he's a really good guy to have behind the scenes. So that would be my guess, but I would be surprised if he made the 53-man roster. So there you go. Murray, Wentz, and JJ McCarthy. And the biggest question, so I've got a question for each one of these positions. And since I don't really have a huge one here outside of will they trade JJ McCarthy, I guess I could have put that. I just put, is he QB2 or QB3? But I could have included, will they trade JJ McCarthy? It still remains possible. I don't think that we see a lot of hints of it, a lot of signs of it, but is it possible? Of course it is. And if you're the Cleveland Browns, we'll get to that later. If you're the Cleveland Browns, why wouldn't you be calling the Vikings every single day and say, can you please give us JJ McCarthy? Because we are stuck here in absolute hell. But nonetheless, on to the running backs. Jordan Mason, Aaron Jones, Xavier Scott, Damon Claiborne, and Max Bredesen. I think they keep 5 running backs. The biggest question here is, will they add someone else? Now, I think that Xavier Scott played very well against the Ravens. Most of his yardage was actually after contact. I don't think that the blocking was great in that game. And he had some broken tackles. He catches the ball very well. He has been in real games good in pass protection. I think in the preseason, there's been a couple pressures that maybe came his way, but overall in practice and when he actually got out there last year, he showed that he could operate the offense from the running back position, get in the right spots to catch the football. I believe he had 14 receptions last year, ran for about 3.6 yards per carry, which doesn't, light your socks on fire, but okay, solid enough, was able to do what they asked him to do. So I think he will continue to be on the roster. And if we're adding a depth chart element to this, I still think he's probably going to be RB3. What we've seen from Damon Claiborne in the 2 preseason games was not really wowing. Didn't look like he was quite on track in terms of following blocks, finding crevices and creases. I think that there is maybe time that's going to be required for some more development for Damon Claiborne. I think that Xavier Scott might be a little bit more ready, being the fact that he is 27 years old. And then, of course, they're keeping the fullback. They could, though, cut Xavier Scott, put him on the practice squad, and add someone else. I saw Trey Benson got released today. There should be some interest in him as a former fairly high draft pick who has a lot of talent and has a lot of speed. But I mean, I think that if you are the Vikings, you do have this question lingering in the back of your mind, because Mason has been a little banged up, not too bad, but Aaron Jones in recent years has missed time, has been slowed down. Do you trust Claiborne and Scott enough to be able to step up should one of those guys get hurt? Or if both of those guys got hurt, would you really trust that you could play an entire game with Damon Claiborne as RB1 or Xavier Scott as RB1? So I do wonder if Nolan Teasley will investigate the running back market, because I think with Claiborne, someone would pick him up based on his speed, but I think with Scott, maybe you could work him over to the practice squad if possible. And now the fact that you can have veterans on the practice squad has really changed a lot of the math with this stuff, because you don't just have to keep the veteran. But as of right now, I would just have those 5 guys projected in the backfield. Let us move over to the wide receivers, where Justin Jefferson, Jordan Addison, Juwan Jennings, Ty Felton, and Miles Price are the wide receivers. And I do not think that they are going to keep a 6th wide receiver. That is the biggest question, though. Would they keep a Dylan Bell, who was good in the preseason game? Would they keep Dante Fleming if they like him in some role on special teams, like kick returning? I haven't seen anything. Or, Jay Sean Jones has had a very good camp, but I haven't seen anything from any of those guys that would make me say there is no way you could get that guy to the practice squad. And when you do have limited space, you are going to look at it like that if you're the Vikings of, Jay Sean Jones has had a really good camp, but do you have to have him on the 53, or is someone going to scoop him up? it would be pretty surprising if a team swooped in and took one of those guys. And even if they did, it's kind of a risk that I think you're willing to take because none of them have shown an enormous upside. I thought Dante Fleming had the best chance at that, but has not really come to fruition. And Jayshon Jones is a very, very solid receiver, but not of the same ilk of talent-wise with Ty Felton and Miles Price. And of course, the depth chart question is just Felton or Price. Which one is going to be the next man up, or which one might end up having a bit of a role? I think that what we've seen for Price has been very, very promising and actually just straight up surprising. Like, I did not expect this guy who's just been a kick returner to suddenly start catching passes left and right and making plays down the field. But with Felton, he does have this one thing that fits really well into their offense and what they need, and that's the deep ball. And you saw that with the 50-yard catch. He goes up, rises up, kind of mosses a guy a little bit there down the sideline. His deep speed is a serious problem. I'm sure that any team that's facing the Vikings will have seen that 50-yard catch and will have, known Ty Felton from coming out in the draft as someone who runs a sub 4.4, and he has caught a lot of deep passes during this training camp. I think that Felton could have a chance to get on the field first, but I wouldn't be shocked if over, longer term, if there are injuries that we do see Miles Price playing wide receiver, maybe even next year, he's like a slot guy. The lineup could be if Juwan Jennings leaves next year. I know this is a 53-man roster. We're getting far down the road, but it could be, Jefferson, Addison, Felton, Price, and somebody else. Tight ends, TJ Hawkinson, Josh Oliver, and I have Gavin Bartholomew. Biggest question is who's tight end 3? It's really a 2-man race between Bartholomew and Ben Yurosek. And I think with Yurosek, it's kind of the same deal with if you cut him and put him on the practice squad, what are the odds that someone comes and picks him up? I don't think that they're very high, that there's a lot of blocking tight ends in the league, and he can catch the football a little bit, but there's a lot of blocking tight ends in the league, whereas Bartholomew was drafted really on his physical potential. If you go back and look at his stats from Pitt, I mean, they're not all that impressive. They did not have very good quarterback play, but he is a really good athlete. He is 250 pounds, 6'4". It's a big guy. So I think he's done enough during this training camp, although I would say that earlier in training camp, he was getting a ton of targets, and that's dipped off a little bit. I know he doesn't control whether the ball comes his way, but production has not quite been on the same level. We haven't seen a whole lot of it during the preseason outside of that 15-yard screen that he got. But I think that physical potential is still high for Gavin Bartholomew, and he will be tight end 3. Now, to the offensive line. Darisaw, Jackson, Brandel, Fries, O'Neal, of course, and the backups, Ryan Vandemark, Joe Huber, Michael Juergens, and Caleb Tiernan. And so I have 9. The question is, will they keep 10 offensive linemen? I decided in this case to cut Henry Bird. He's been on the practice squad, and it's not really based on how he played at left tackle the other day, just that he's been on the practice squad. He's been developing for a number of years. He's 27 years old, and I think that's another guy that you could get to the practice squad. If you cut someone younger, it's always possible that another team could like what they see in preseason and swoop in. Last year, I thought Huber had a better preseason than he has this year, but still got into a game, and Michael Juergens has played a lot during the preseason. You could tell they're trying to get him as much experience as possible, so I'd be surprised if he was let go. Gavin Gerhardt, I think, will probably get let go, the 7th round draft pick, and be put on the practice squad. And then Tiernan, I know, has been banged up, so his health might make somewhat of a difference of whether they keep another guy, but it seemed like from what Kevin O'Connell said, he should be back at the start of the season, and Vandemark should give a lot more confidence to the left tackle position. So the question is really, do they keep 9? Do they keep 10? And will they add another offensive lineman? Because if right now you go into the season with your backups being Huber and Juergens, there's not a lot of experience there. I think you'd like to have somebody who is more experienced, maybe that gets cut from another team. Remember, once upon a time, the Vikings cut John Sullivan and he went out to the Rams and played really well. So is there a version of that somewhere around the league where there's a center or guard with some center experience who loses a camp battle to a young player or whatever, and you could sign him and bring him in as a backup. I saw that Will Hernandez and Laken Tomlinson were working out for, I think it was Detroit the other day. Like, there's still a couple of guys that are out there. Like, could you possibly decide that you are going to bring in an interior offensive lineman? I think somebody with experience would make some sense there. All right, the defensive line is where the most haggling happened here because I decided to go with 6, and they're all young, with Jalen Redmond, Levi Drake Rodriguez, Ty Ingram Dawkins, Caleb Banks, Dominique Orange, and Elijah Williams. After these 2 preseason games, there is no way that I'm cutting Elijah Williams. He has just been legitimately good. He's been good in training camp. He was good last year in the preseason. He got in a little bit last year into the games. I would not be letting him go because I think another team would swoop in and get him. And I wouldn't even be that shocked if he worked his way onto the field. You get one guy banged up, he's part of a rotation. The guy that I had to cut here that I wasn't really sure about was Isaiah Loudermilk, who they signed from the Pittsburgh Steelers. Another player that I think you can either get another version of on your practice squad or just keep him on your practice squad. I don't know that there's going to be a ton of interest from other teams at picking up somebody who's kind of bounced around or is, well, I shouldn't say that, but he's been with Pittsburgh for a while, comes to Minnesota. If he gets beat out for a job, like how much interest will there be elsewhere? And I also think that you can usually find a guy with some size that is not that effective, but is big enough to kind of do the job. And like they just brought back Jonathan Harris, who I kind of thought that about a couple years ago when he was with the Vikings, or maybe it was last year. I thought the same thing. Like, he's big enough and could probably do the job in a pinch. Well, there's a number of those defensive tackles who are like that, but there's not a lot of them that get penetration and make plays like Elijah Williams has in the last 2 preseasons. So I only went with 6 guys there. And the biggest question is, will they roll with no veterans? You look at that group, and I mean, Redmond is older. He's like, I think 28, but still not a lot of experience. He has just 1 year of actually playing defensive tackle, and Levi Drake new to starting. Ty Ingram Dawkins, I asked Levi Drake today about him, and he just raved about like how much growth Ingram Dawkins has made, but still very young, 17 games coming. Caleb Banks, I think we've seen some of the pluses and minuses to where Caleb Banks is at right now. Dominique Orange, I've liked what I've seen, but can he play, 30 or 40 snaps in a game if he's called upon? We'll see. Outside linebackers kept Dallas Turner, Andrew Van Ginkel, Tyler Batty, Bo Richter, and Chaz Chambliss, who is apparently, and I'm not joking about this, the backup fullback. Yep, we have learned that over the last couple of days. He took a rep. Dane Mizutani deserves credit for spotting it, and so does Emily Liker. I didn't see it, but he took a rep as a fullback in joint practices, and we're like, well, what? What happened? Because Dane's going, did 57 just run across to the other field? And so that is happening, that he is going to be the backup fullback for Max Bredesen. So he's probably going to make the team as someone who could play special teams, backup fullback, inside and outside linebacker. The more you can do, folks. That is kind of the story of all these guys. But of course, the biggest question that we've been asking time and time again throughout the offseason, and when you see guys signing, when you see Derek Barnett find a home, I know someone mentioned him the other night as a potential option. When you see Von Miller find a home, it's getting late early here to add that one extra player if they want to, or it could be that Nolan Teasley is just going to wait until he sees who's cut down first before deciding to add another free agent. But the free agents, the last group of guys, are kind of coming off the shelf at this moment. So will they add someone else? And who would be the guy that is out if that happens? Or would they take from somewhere else on the roster? I think I've got one potential spot, because Richter is a really key special teamer. So I think he's in. He's also played well when he's gotten in the games. Tyler Batty made his case the other day. I thought he really played well. So they may want to see it. They may like what they see. And if Brian Flores likes what he sees, then they're going to roll with it. Okay, to the inside linebackers, corners, and safeties. I put them all in one graphic. Sorry for the small text. The linebackers, Blake Cashman, Eric Wilson, Jake Golday, Ivan Pace Jr. The biggest question is, would they keep Jacob Roberts, who's made a couple of big plays in the preseason games, has looked like he's got some talent, and he's played a ton of special teams, which is always a signal that there's a possibility there. I would be surprised if Ivan Pace Jr. got cut, though. Not because he's played well in camp or been exceptional when he was in there during the preseason games, or recently when he's actually been on the field, but really the special teams element and knowing the defense. He plays a lot of special teams, and you need that when you're talking about, I don't know how many kick returns there's going to be against the Vikings this year, but like 40 to 50 kick returns maybe. You need guys who can run down and make tackles. And he does know the defense quite well. So if you did have someone go down, you can at least put in a guy who knows your defense. But they might like Jacob Roberts better from the fact that he's been making plays during the preseason. Kind of an intriguing name to keep an eye on. Cornerback, I decided to go with 5, and this is where I'm the least confident. Because I went with Isaiah Rodgers, Byron Murphy Jr., James Pierre, Charles Demings. To me, those guys are locks. And Zamiah Vaughn, who has made some plays in training camp, and it's been a hard road for the corners during the preseason. The Giants couldn't complete a pass. The Ravens did, throw the ball a little bit on them, but Charles Demings I think he's had 4 total targets in these 2 games. We're talking about him all the time in camp, and then it's like, can't wait for you guys to see Charles Demings, and then they never throw at him. So anywho, with Zamiah Vaughn, though, I think that his size, a little bit extra depth, could play special teams as maybe what's the opposite of punt stopper of the gunner position. I've actually never asked what that's called. I guess it's just cornerback on the punt, or if they've got a special name for it. I don't know. If somebody knows that, I guess I got to ask Matt Daniels that. But the biggest question is 4 or 5. Would they just keep 4, or would they actually have 5 cornerbacks and have a little extra depth with Zamiah Vaughn, or do they think they can get him to the practice squad? And at the safety position, Josh Metellus, Theo Jackson, Jay Ward, Jakobe Thomas, and Jakobe Thomas. And the biggest question is just, Jakobe Thomas? I think Jakobe Thomas. The amount that he's been playing lately with the first and second team, it would be completely shocking, actually, if he got cut at this point. But there aren't really any other questions at the safety position, so that's the biggest one. It's just Jakobe Thomas, who has, to me, been Mr. Mankato. If he makes that 53, which I am projecting him to do, and I think he will, I see a lot of good things with him. Dane Mizutani, I know, brought up like a comparison to Cam Bynum. I totally see it, of someone who's very intelligent, but also has enough athletic traits. I think that Jakobe Thomas is a better athlete than Cam Bynum, and has aggressiveness to him, has a playmaking element to him. He's just shown a lot over the last number of weeks. And it did come into my mind, like, we know that with Brian Flores, he's just going to play the guy that he likes the most. So is it possible that Jakobe Thomas could play over Theo Jackson? I'd be surprised if that happened, but if Jackson is banged up, or if they feel like, hey, we didn't love what we saw from Theo last year, we're going to go to Jakobe Thomas. Again, would be surprised, but you never know with Flores until we actually get out there. There was a milkshake once won with Ivan Pace starting instead of Brian Asamoah, who we thought, oh yeah, he's going to be the starter. And then it sort of shifted in camp. Well, things have shifted toward Jakobe Thomas in camp. That doesn't mean that he necessarily is going to have the job, because in the joint practices, Theo Jackson did more work, but it'll be something I'm intrigued by. And as far as kicker, punter, and long snapper, we know the kicker, we know the long snapper. I'm going to say that Johnny Hekker will get the job, and that they will get Brett Thorson onto their practice squad with a plan to have him as the punter next year. I am not a punting analyst. Maybe I need to work harder. I can't always tell what they want out of those punts. Like, when someone punts at 65, did you want it to be punted 65? Or is that just really cool for onlookers? Whoa, he punted at 65 for Johnny Hekker the other day. But I can confidently say that I've liked what I've seen from Brett Thorson. He's held the ball for a couple of successful field goals in games, long field goals for Will Reichert. It would not be the biggest shock in the world if Brett Thorson ended up getting the job, because this team did once upon a time go from Jordan Berry to Ryan Wright. So it's going to be best man wins. I'm going to lean toward the veteran, but I would not be shocked if it is the rookie. Also wanted to bring up before I get to all of you guys' questions and comments and thoughts, I wanted to also look at some notes I made watching the preseason game back. They are not of the X's and O's variety. Just a couple of names that I wanted to bring up of how I thought about things during the game and in the post game, and if it may have changed or I noticed some other stuff after that. So let's take a look at a couple of film observations. Do want to mention also that later on tonight, Andrew Brandt is going to come on, former VP of the Packers, with some great insight into negotiating quarterback contracts and so forth. So I didn't mention that at the top of the show, but that is coming up later on tonight. So here are just a run of things that stood out to me when rewatching the game against the Ravens. And yes, my eyes did need surgery from bleeding after that, watching it back. It was not the most pretty game, but there were some things that were really good. One of them was Jake Golday's physical play. He had two different reps where he came in and was blocked by a running back and just smashed into the running back and drove him back into the quarterback. Very impressive physical play there, made a bunch of tackles and was around the football in the first game. I think he's had a good preseason and just a good training camp overall. And he may be part of convincing Brian Flores that he does not need to go out, and Nolan Teasley, that he does not need to go out and get an outside linebacker, because one of those rushes was at outside linebacker for Golday. I thought Jakobe Thomas looked really good again. There's a play, and Will Raggets pointed this out, but there's a play where Bo Richter knocks the football down, where Jakobe Thomas, if you look at him on the film, is about to jump it for a pick six. He is right out, like ready with the hands up, ready to pick it off. And instead it gets knocked down by Richter at the defensive line. But Thomas is just near the football all the time. He comes up and makes tackles, gets his hand on the ball. I did think that Caleb Banks had more good plays than the first game against the Giants. Now, he had some really tough reps as well. And I know that he said after that, you know, he needed to do some gassers or whatever. I do think when quoting Caleb Banks, you know, people have to understand that he's like very personable and he has a good sense of humor. And I'm not saying he was completely joking, but I mean, it's not like he was saying, I'm completely out of shape, I can't play football. I think it's more of he went through this entire thing, because I saw that going around. I was like, okay, but he went through the thing with the foot. I think he was just sort of being earnest, like, yeah, I need to continue to get in shape. And people took that as like, he's this player who you drafted first round, he's not in shape. It's like, no, he went through this thing with the foot. So he didn't really get reps until 2 weeks ago. And then they've thrown a million reps at him, including in the joint practices and then the game, which there weren't that many players who played a ton in both. So just wanted to contextualize that. I mentioned Elijah Williams. Every time the kid goes out there, he's doing something. There were a couple of reps where he just got in the backfield against the run. Tyler Batty, very active. I also noticed Cameron Stewart on a couple of plays. He is a guy that I think is destined for the practice squad and some development. Dylan Bell and Xavier Scott, maybe the only two guys that had good offensive days, but Bell, his quickness just stands out. Like there is something there. I don't know what it is exactly. He will probably be put on the practice squad, but I think that's worth taking a deeper look at for the Vikings. And you saw it in the game. And Xavier Scott actually was probably better than I thought when I was there. That he had guys bouncing off him, got most of his yards after contact, made a nice catch. And Damon Claiborne just didn't have a lot of chances to break loose, but also didn't really create those chances for himself. And he did pass block okay in a handful of reps, in case you were wondering. So there is the entire rundown. I'm going to get you a FanDuel question of the day and a message from our sponsor, and then we will get to your thoughts on my 53-man projection and truly anything else that's on your mind. Throw it in the chat that you want to talk about now that we've reached the final days of officially training camp, and we are starting now to march toward the cutdowns, the final preseason game, what you guys want to see in that, what is left to talk about, and then week one is right around the corner. And yet still we have to wait a while. It's gonna drag to get there, folks. I mean, it's just like Christmas Day. Okay, so let me give you the FanDuel question of the day. That is, the Browns today made the bold and brave decision to name Deshaun Watson as their starting quarterback, which is just incredible. And their over-under is 6.5 on FanDuel. But that's not the worst over-under in the entire league. But my question is, are the Browns the most bleak team in the entire NFL? I know I usually try to make these about the Vikings, but I did think today that there are some of you who in the comment section can be rather harsh, and that is totally allowed on this channel, but always maybe keep in the back of your mind, you're not the Browns. On this day especially. So that is the FanDuel question of the day. Are the Browns the most bleak team in the National Football League? Their over-under is 6.5. And I want to tell you about our sponsor, Brooklyn Bedding. More than a sponsor to me, but a friend now, because I got their Aurora Luxe mattress, and it has just been a life changer. I cannot tell you how great it's been to get my mattress from Brooklyn Bedding. I wanted to have something that was cost effective, but also long-term durability, something I'm not going to have to change out in 6 months, not some sort of mass produced or disposable piece of foam that just, turns into a hammock after a few months of sleeping on it. That is not what this is. This has got great craftsmanship. You could tell that I'm going to have this mattress for a long time, built right here in the USA. And I have some issues with the back. My spine has been feeling so much better. And I can't tell you how much better that's helped me sleep now that I have this really good mattress supporting the spine. So Brooklyn Bedding, what I love about them is we were able to get the exact model that we were looking for, the exact size, but they can help you with every type of body, every type of sleep style, even hard to find sizes. They will get what you want. And they also have a comfort trial, which lasts 120 nights. So if you're not totally comfortable, you can swap it or you can return the mattress hassle-free. That will not be something I'm doing, but you can know that you have that option. So go to brooklynbedding.com and use the promo code PURPLE to get 30% off site-wide right now. Go to brooklynbedding.com. The promo code is PURPLE, and 30% off is a lot. So that's a good idea if you are considering adding to the bedding. All right. The mattresses, the pillows, the sheets. Okay, let's get to your questions and comments. We will start off with, let's see. Let me scroll up here a little bit. Okay. Mr. Mayer says, I wonder what it was like back in the day when there were only 5 practice squad spots. I mean, can you imagine? Can you imagine how hard this would be? Like, as I was doing the cut down, and even as I am going through the different questions, some of it feels like, yeah, I mean, that could be a tough cut, but that'll be fine. And like, well, Dylan Bell, I still have liked some things that I've seen from him, but it'll be fine. He'll be on the practice squad. It really has changed how we talk about it, because I remember cut down day, even when I first started and there were 10 spots where it felt pretty intense and there would be some surprises, and there still are around the NFL. It's not like it's completely lost its luster, because there'll be trades. There's a few going on right now, trades in the NFL and things like that. But those 10 spots is like, who are they going to keep? This guy versus this guy. How are they going to make that, decision and so forth? And now it feels like everybody gets a roster spot, which is great for a lot of players that have a chance to develop and eventually be on the team. Scamping around, I'm glad you enjoyed the conversation with Jarrett Bailey of SB Nation. It will not be the last time that he comes on the show. If you guys missed that one, after this, go check that conversation out. We talked about the teams that are definitively better than the Vikings, and we came up with only 3 that were blatantly better, and I'm sure you guys can guess them, but there were a few teams that I think we decided, yeah, I think there's an edge there, and a lot of teams that are in the same ballpark as the Vikings, but I won't spoil that conversation. Isaiah, thanks for listening to, I did appear also on Dane Moore. So if you're bored, there's a lot of me you can have. I was on Dane Moore's podcast. That was pretty cool because I got to talk basketball, got to talk about the new ownership of the Minnesota Timberwolves and a little bit about Purple Insider. So check that out as well. Scamping Around says, excited to see what third downs can look like with Murray and Jennings in the mix. Yeah, I think that the third and Juwan thing is very real. And the reason it's very real is that there is attention drawn to other wide receivers. And he is really good at getting open underneath in space, and then being hard to tackle. That to me is the key. I remember Jarius Wright was sort of sneaky, and he was Mr. Third Down here. He was sort of sneaky hard to tackle. He was only 5'9" or 5'10", but he would get the ball in his hands and he was kind of quick and shifty, and he could get open and get that extra 2 or 3 yards to get a first down. Whereas I think Jauan Jennings just runs through people, which is either way, it just needs to get the job done. But on third downs, that could be a big deal. What I have noticed about Kyler Murray, though, is that his career third and short. So I looked this up not that long ago, so it's in my brain. Third and shorter than 5. So 5 or fewer yards on third down over the last, since 2019, since he came into the league. He is the 7th best quarterback in terms of passer rating in that scenario. So very good at third and short, just even throwing. And I didn't even add in how many first downs he's run for, but I'm sure it's among the league leaders in those 3rd and 5 or less. When it's past 7 yards, he was 27th out of about like 45 quarterbacks. I think that tells a story that there is a part of his game where if you are not running successfully, if you're not staying ahead of the sticks, that he will have a little more trouble when teams can drop back more guys, when they can send more exotic blitzes, and he can make up for some of that with his scrambling ability. But if you can stay in favorable situations, this is where Jennings is important. This is where Hawkinson, Oliver, Bredesen, check downs to Aaron Jones, like all those things that, you know, when O'Connell talks about the power of completions, even if you get a 5-yard pass on first down, it's 2nd and 5. And you can run on that down and you have a chance to get yourself to third and short where Kyler Murray has thrived. I mean, if you're dropping back and incompleting 2 passes in a row or taking a sack or something like that, like, so it's got to be a balance for Kevin O'Connell for how he manages wanting to lean into Kyler Murray's skill. And I saw Jefferson told Mike Silver that he was very impressed by the arm talent of Kyler Murray and was not familiar exactly with his game before. He knew the athleticism, but didn't know what a nice ball he threw. He told Mike Silver that. I retweeted that if you want to check it out at The Athletic. But, you know, I mean, that's the key. And that's what's going to drive the success is Murray to Jefferson. But there's going to be a lot of scenarios where do you kind of hammer the run a little bit to set up a favorable situation for Kyler Murray? Or are you just straight dropping back over and over again and taking the risk? And you can't never take the risk. But I also think that if Kevin O'Connell ran on 2nd and 8 a little bit more this year, that it wouldn't be, I know that's anti-analytics and is not generally thought of as a good EPA decision, but it is a good game control decision sometimes. And I think that O'Connell's going to have to be very sharp with Kyler Murray on those things. Mama, we could use Dylan Thieneman. It's true. And I will say that if they had drafted Dylan Thieneman, we would have seen a lot of him and he would be running all over the place and he would be starting and he would be the guy pretty quickly here along with Josh Metellus. They opted to go with the higher ceiling with Caleb Banks. And it's not higher ceiling necessarily as he'll be a better player. I mean, they're 2 different positions, but it's more of higher value and harder replaceability. Even though Caleb Banks only had 3 or 4 plays that stood out to me the other day, the power with which he walked a tackle back into the quarterback, and funny enough, got a quarterback hit for it when the quarterback kind of just fell down, but he pushed the tackle straight back into the quarterback, just pure strength. I'm stronger than you. Let's have a walk. That's something that you can't find anywhere else. So I think there's going to have to be some patience. And I'm sure if Dylan Thieneman gets 4 picks and Caleb Banks plays 22% of the snaps, that we will have the Jared versus Dallas Turner conversation again for a little while. Clearly, there's going to be development required for Caleb Banks, and they decided that that was the better route to go than getting the guy who could help them right away. I don't know which decision is going to be right. I was not the biggest fan of going to get Dylan Thieneman as much as I thought he was a really good prospect. It just, for me, that safety position, I mean, you've seen Jacob Roberts step into it as an undrafted free agent. That safety position, 1st round picks there are not for me. I would not be spending 1st round picks on that position. Mr. Mayor, how do we have 3 safeties on the roster with the same last name, with 2 basically with the same first name? What are the odds? And that's the thing. I did have him cutting Jakobe Thomas. They may keep him as a special teams expert. He was there last year. I know they like him a lot. So it might be him instead of Zamiah Vaughn that is on the roster. So I should have mentioned that, is will they keep Javier for another kind of special teams specialist? I could see it, but I could also see them trying to keep one extra cornerback. That's the way that I went, but it was a hard call because they do like Jakobe Thomas quite a bit on the special teams side. How did they end up? I don't know. I mean, Thomas is a relatively common name, I guess, but it is funny that, when you're talking about Jakobe Thomas and Jakob Thomas, it's like, wait, at the same position? So Jakobe Thomas is back. Jakob Thomas is doing awesome. Jakobe Thomas is on the bubble. There's your Thomas report, which we may have to do after every game. But yeah, that is strange and funny. And Mr. Mayor mentioned earlier, I couldn't find the comment, but about just like doing a 53 yourself and kind of not really haggling that much over the bottom of the roster guys, because it's sort of like 50 cents or a $50, this guy or that guy. And I definitely feel you on that. And I think that this roster has gotten a lot deeper as we've gone along, with a draft class that has promise and a random guy, Jakob Thomas, showing up and turning out to look like he's got some pretty serious potential, and Jacob Roberts making some plays. And so you feel like there's more potential there. But when we're talking about, UDFAs and special teams and stuff like that, it's never going to feel like it's, the end of the world if you have to cut a certain guy, especially with the practice squad being so big. VA Vikings just says Harrison Smith. Well, I didn't include Harrison Smith on the 53-man roster. I do wonder every day what Harrison Smith is thinking, but if I'm in his shoes, what I'm thinking is, look at all these young guys who have a chance to do something here, whether it's even Josh Metellus, who's not necessarily young, but he is in a new position. So he's got this spot where he can kind of take his game to another level. Theo Jackson has been working for 4 or 5 years now to get to this point. And you have these other players, Jakobe Thomas, a draft pick who's got a chance. You got Jakob Thomas. Do you want to come back and immediately take a job from somebody? Or would you kind of prefer to see how this plays out? And if they need you in week 10, maybe you decide that that's when you're going to come back if he actually wants to play again. I never really expected a big announcement from Harrison Smith, but I mean, if he did decide to return, maybe if Theo Jackson is seriously hurt, which I don't think he is, but if he was, then maybe he would consider it. It's hard to put yourself in somebody else's shoes who has not given us any detail whatsoever on what they think about their position. And, he might just decide, I'm just going to chill and see what happens and go from there. Or he might have a plan. He might have if this happens, I'm coming back. If that happens, it doesn't. I don't know if he's been working out or if he has just been, a citizen, which has to be, these guys, they, just give everything to football. They care about it so much. Harrison cares about it so much, but walking around with your kid and playing golf. During this time of year when there's the dog days and you're out there sweating every single day and it's so long and there's 17 weeks, at a certain age, that probably feels pretty nice. So, but I'll be curious to see if it happens. Poyam says, about, I assume, JJ McCarthy, afraid to say his name and get attacked. We all want him to do well. He's just not doing well. And Mr. Mayor adds, no hate for McCarthy, just disappointment. Reminded this week that all my hate is reserved for Deshaun Watson. Yeah, well, that's fair enough. And again, I just can't imagine being a Cleveland Browns fan and what that must feel like to hear. Okay, is Shedeur Sanders going to be good? Probably not. But at least there's a chance he's good. Deshaun Watson has not been good at football since 2021, and has just been an absolute horror show every time he's gone out there, not to mention all of the off-field stuff, which is appalling. And he's shocked that the fans are booing him. Oh man, it felt personal. Yeah, bro, it actually is. It is actually very personal, completely personal when it comes to something like this. he is a disaster. And to not play a younger quarterback who may have potential, Shedeur did have a very successful college career. And I know he's slow with his processing, and I know he floats the ball sometimes or whatever, but you're not going to win. Just play Shedeur Sanders and see what happens. You don't know. Like he could lock in the second half of the season. He did have some entertaining games last year. At least the people who pay all the huge, enormous prices to show up at that stadium could go there with some degree of excitement when they walk in the door and sit down in their seats, as opposed to feeling like, am I supporting a sex predator by doing this? Like, that's what you're asking your fans to do. Oh, and by the way, watch the worst quarterback in football for the last 4 years play, coming off of a horrible injury. Great stuff. Why anyone would walk into that stadium for the first game, I have no idea. No one should. No one should go into that stadium for that football game. It's gross. Son of Beavers. So which tight end is getting cut? We just signed another one. We worked out 3 cornerbacks today. Yeah, I mean, I'd be surprised if any of those guys made the team. Maybe if they really loved somebody against Denver, they could make the practice squad. But it would be Ben Urosic and also Bryson Nesbitt. Those are the other 2 tight ends. And Urosic, I've liked him. Really. I mean, he catches the ball when it comes his way. He's a big dude. He can block. It's really about the upside of Gavin Bartholomew, and I think he is a physical enough player to be a blocker and can also catch the football. And the fact that they're taking a linebacker and making him a backup fullback, which is just an absolute dream for this podcast. But, I mean, the fact that they're doing that kind of says to me, well, wouldn't you just keep Urosic as a tight end if you're going to keep him on the roster? Maybe that's looking too much into it, but I think the guy you drafted who has hands and athleticism and can go down the field and make catches is probably the one you want, because you also want to be able to decide what you are going to do next year at tight end if you're moving on from TJ Hawkinson. Joker, JJ McCarthy has fallen behind year 1 of the 5-year plan to develop into a starter. Maybe he could be ready by 2031. You know, you jest because your name is Joker, but I really do think that after what we've seen from JJ McCarthy in the preseason, after what we've seen from him in training camp, that it probably is a couple of year type of thing until you feel like he can actually be a starter. If he develops, if he puts his head down, if he really commits to it. And I was thinking about a couple examples of that. Alex Smith is actually maybe the best example of somebody who was a 1-speed thrower, learned to throw with a little more touch. I know he was a top draft pick, but he had a great arm and would just rip the ball at everybody. Very slow processing, 52% completion percentage over his first 3 years, and then came back with a good situation, but it wasn't perfect until Harbaugh got there, and played much better and kept the starting job until Harbaugh got there and they won 13 games. So it can happen. And, you know, Sam Darnold also was not good until 27. That happened for Alex Smith at age 26 or 27. It might take that long. And McCarthy should not just give up, because if you turn out to be good at age 27, look how much longer you could play in the NFL. I mean, Stetson Bennett was making the rounds for this crazy throw he made in the Rams game. The guy's 28. Like, he's still thought of as like a young quarterback or something. He's 28 years old. It's crazy. So, you know, there's plenty of time for McCarthy to continue to work on his game long-term for his career. But I think that these things take much longer than 10 training camp practices. And I think they take much longer than 17 preseason passes. And you could try all you want to accelerate that. You can work with quarterback coaches. You can throw with your teammates, and you should do every bit of that. But I think that now that we sit here, the expectation that it was all going to be different was just too lofty. That's what I think sitting here right now is the folks who expected him to win the quarterback competition and be much better and much different. It's never really worked that way for quarterbacks who've had these issues. So it was too lofty to expect that he would just be a very completely different quarterback. This is a slower process. And I love the golf analogies, but in one summer, you don't go from having a 15 handicap to a scratch golfer. It's usually a slower progression. And I know they didn't think that that was going to be the case when they named him the starting quarterback last year, but I think that's also where they missed very much, is that they thought that these things could happen quicker than they actually could. Scamping around, top tier Flores defense plus top 15 offense equals playoff success. Have a lot of confidence in KOC to brew up a good offense with Murray and a healthier line. New running game will be sweet. I really like what they've done from the run game perspective, and now you have to prove it. Kevin O'Connell has shown commitment to it, and they didn't go out and get a totally new running back. Remember that the purse strings were a little tight during the offseason period because they hadn't extended O'Neal yet to make some cap space, and they did not spend much in free agency, but then they go get Jawan Jennings, who they really needed. So that's where maybe now a running back situation comes up. They could bring someone else in. That's really my only question. I think that Jordan Mason can run extremely well. I think from what I've seen that Aaron Jones still has enough left to be a good RB2. And the depth after that, I think probably for 30 teams is a question mark. Maybe Arizona, funny enough, they just cut Trey Benson, but they've got like a really good 1, 2, 3. Maybe they'll trade Tyler Algier, who they signed in the offseason, and then go and draft the number 3 overall pick. Who knows? It's the Cardinals. But as far as the complete unit on the offensive line, I think that if we go back through the years, this might be the most complete that they've been in some time, because when you look at those teams that won, so 2017 was, I think, a solid offensive line. They could really run block, along with a good tight end, 2 great wide receivers. Still missing that wide receiver 3. Dalvin Cook gets hurt. They didn't really, they were hunting for that wide receiver 3 for some time after Jarius Wright left. That's the reason we still talk about him, is because his name would come up repeatedly of, they're still hunting. They tried Kendall Wright and Tajay Spears, and Laquan Treadwell for an entire year was their wide receiver 3, and none of it ever really worked out. Jawan Jennings is the best wide receiver 3 they've probably had in quite some time. I like what Jalen Naylor did for sure, and KJ Osborne. So he'll have to, get over the bar of KJ Osborne in some of the years he had in 2021 and 2022. But still, his resume is even better than that. The offensive line is as good as it's been. Yeah, there are still some question marks, but as good and as healthy as they've been. So Murray really has everything there. It's just, can you make it happen is the question. Jax, as disappointing as J.J. McCarthy's performance is lately, he doesn't have character issues unlike a certain quarterback named from an AFC West team. I think you mean AFC North team, who has things for massages. Yeah, I don't think that in general that would be my concern about McCarthy. It's really, how do you, as the days go on, take what's happened here? Because when it first happens, it's sort of like this. And luckily I married my first girlfriend, so I've never been broken up with. But I know of people who have. So try the analogy. Like when you first get broken up with, you're like, it's cool, man. It's fine. Don't need her anyway. I'm going to go out. And now I'm free. I can do whatever I want. It's great. And then like probably 5 days later, you're just a total mess. So I wonder about the longer term of that, of like coming to grips with what's happened and what's necessary for him to be ready if they go to him. If he is QB3, like that's going to be another really tough hit if he's not QB2 when it comes to the first game of the season for JJ McCarthy. So how do you take this all mentally? I think some of those quarterbacks that have gone through hell and gotten back to the other side, like Alex Smith or Sam Darnold, I'm sure there were a lot of days that were really, really hard, but they kept pushing. And JJ McCarthy's going to need to do that. Those throws the other day, though, it seemed like there's almost a little bit of a shift from a lot of people maybe wondering, was this competition not fair to McCarthy, or was he wronged in some way, to, yeah, there's nothing you could say to justify that. Like the wide open Miles Price in the end zone, that has to be a touchdown. It just absolutely has to be. And the one in the back of the end zone is not the easiest throw in the world, but it's certainly makeable when the guy's breaking open in the back of the end zone and you just lead him and he's there and touchdown. It happens 50 times a week. So, I think that progress is going to take a little longer, and maybe folks are kind of coming to grips with that, and where that leaves them in the future, who knows? I'm just thinking really from his own perspective that it's not likely to just be, oh, well, he'll just take over as the quarterback next year. I don't know that that's an option right now. Joker, not a Caleb Banks believer. How long do I have to duct tape my mouth shut to give him time to develop? Sadly, it's probably going to be like 2 years. You might have to. I mean, I don't know how long it's going to take, and I'm sure that they don't either with Caleb Banks. I mean, you look at Dallas Turner. I think that if we were talking last year, week 8, about Dallas Turner, you would have said, this guy's a bust. This is just not working out. It's just over, folks. And then he gets into Jonathan Grenard's position, and all of a sudden some things click. And he has that Seattle game, which I think was a huge one for his confidence. He just played great, got after the quarterback, it's a strip sack, and he was a different player down the stretch, winning one-on-one matchups, creating pressures, getting some run stops, just getting sacks, and then comes into this year. I asked Darisaw today, I was like, is it just me or is Dallas Turner stronger? And he said, absolutely. Like from last year, that because they've been battling it out in camp every single day, making each other better. But he raved about Dallas Turner and where he's at right now as a pass rusher. We would have not thought that at week 8 last year. So you really don't know. I mean, even like look at Jordan Love when he played Brian Flores in that game where Kirk tore his Achilles. We're like, yeah, Jordan Love stinks, man. This is never going to happen for him. And then he turns a corner. So you're going to have to be patient with Caleb Banks. And I think if we do get to a point down the road where we're saying, all right, this just hasn't worked out, like we'll kind of know. You know what I mean? I think we'll kind of know. But I think it's going to be a while. Mr. Maris is kind of in the same spot as Joker, just didn't get the logic of picking a development project in the first round. Pick a guy who can contribute at a high level for all 5 years of their contract. I understand that line of thinking, but here is the trouble for me. It is that I believe that defensive tackles take over games are the worst thing in the entire universe for an offense to face. Aaron Donald is the best example. Chris Jones is a great example. You go back through history and look at the guys. John Randall. I mean, is there anyone you would less want to face than John Randall? He is right over top of you, and he is terrifying, and he will be at your feet in less than 2 seconds. Take the snap, and he is right in your face. The size... There's only a couple of guys in the world that are the size and quickness of Caleb Banks. You look at the combine and look at where he's ranking in, the 95th percentile in this and the 98th in that. So I get it, because if that does click, then defensive tackles are also very reliable from year to year and also very good from year to year. So and they last a long time. So if you go and you have like a guy who just sets a certain standard and he's quality, he's probably going to be good for a long time. Like consistently, year after year after year, just good. And his sacks might go up and down, but the pressure, the run stopping, like the dominance, the attention they draw. Look at Vita Vea. It's every single year. Those guys are like that at the top level. So if you draft that guy, I mean, you can have him until 2035. I mean, really, like those guys last a long time. So I get why they did it. I think from a shorter term perspective, yes, someone like Dylan Thieneman would have made more sense, but I also don't believe that Brian Flores thinks that way. And we've seen that with other draft picks where he just doesn't think in those terms of, well, I could get fired next year, so I'm going to pick a player I like less because he helps me more now. It just doesn't seem to be his nature. VA Viking, do you think that if JJ doesn't play Friday, the Vikings are looking to trade him? I don't know what to read into Friday. It is a UFL game, essentially. I mean, this is going to be, you think those first 2 games were rough? Maybe this will be more fun. I don't know. But, I mean, it's going to be 3rd-teamers and 4th-teamers the entire way, would be my guess. I mean, last year, we were breaking down every single Max Brosmer throw, and he played a great game in this exact scenario. And he may, again, play a great game. There's not a lot to be judged there. And if you are... JJ McCarthy, and this may be why Carson Wentz was taking some reps today. Maybe he'll get the start. I don't know. I mean, if you're JJ McCarthy, are you going to send all the second teamers out there, including some guys who are going to be like actually on the team and playing? I wouldn't even want Ty Felton or Miles Price, especially not Ty Felton, who plays such a big special teams role. I wouldn't even want those guys out there playing, truly, because you don't want to get anybody in any role injured I would probably not, including backup quarterback. I would probably not play JJ McCarthy. Doesn't mean that they're looking to trade him or not. What it might come down to with McCarthy would just be two things. One is, well, how convinced were you by his progress? Because they have different standards than we do. We're looking at the results, and I could tell you, here's what I've seen from the throws, and here's what I've observed, but I don't know what the plays are. I don't know what the command is of the offense. I have felt like the processing has not been faster, but maybe they think differently than that. If they are liking how he's practiced and they like how he is developing, even if it's baby steps, well then, yeah, I mean, keep him. But if behind the scenes they are really disappointed with how he's taken this on, I haven't heard anything like that. I'm just saying that's a scenario. If they're really disappointed and the Browns or the Jets or someone, the Cardinals are calling and saying, hey, you know, we're thinking about making a move there. Are you interested? Maybe they have to consider it. So it really depends a lot on things we don't know. But if I'm Kevin O'Connell, I'm not giving up a quarterback who could play for me and knows my offense, because they've had to go and get, you know, the Josh Dobbs of the world, or they've had to dip into the Max Brosmers of the world. Like, they don't want to do that again if there's multiple injuries. Scamping around at this point, I can only hope that we don't start the season like we did in 2023 with fumbles galore. Start of the season is going to be crazy, man. Packers and then the Chicago Bears and Tampa Bay Bucks right out of the gate. Like, what a way to start. I like it that way. I really like it that way, because for the Vikings, they don't have to play Micah Parsons, and there's just so much energy to those first couple games. Soldier Field is going to be crazy like it was last year. Monday Night Football, US Bank Stadium, absolutely wild for week one. I mean, the energy is going to be out of this world, I think, for those two games. And if you win them, then you're going to be looking already at this huge advantage. And if you lose them, then the uphill climb is so difficult after that. Like, there's so much on the line for these first two games, which maybe you don't like. Maybe you would prefer they just play the Titans or something in week one, play the worst. Who's the worst team? The Jets. Play the Jets or the Dolphins in week one. They don't have the Titans on the schedule, but like, play the worst team you could come up with. Maybe you like that, but I'd prefer week one. We get our football back, and this is what we get, this classic NFC North matchup. Mr. Mayor drafting a guy for projected contributions they'll make on their second contract seems crazy. It's not like there was a dearth of immediate contributors when we were on the clock drafting. Well, that just kind of depends on, with Caleb Banks, if you're looking at it as like a 5-year development plan for how much he can produce. Because let's say the peak ceiling 5 years into his career, if everything works out great, is he turns out to be Chris Jones. Holy cow. Number one, you got a guy who's just going to maul people for many years to come. Still, 5 years into a career, you got at least 5 to 7 years left of a guy playing at a high level. If you reach that top 5-ish defensive tackle. Cam Hayward playing forever. I mentioned Vita Vea. Like, these guys, Dexter Lawrence, they usually play really well into their late 20s and 30s, and you have to keep that in mind. He is still a relatively young prospect. But let's just say that by year 3, that he's 75% of Chris Jones. I mean, that's pretty darn good. If by year 2, he's 60% of Chris Jones and he's playing 50% of the snaps and he's getting pressures and he's getting, plays where he dominates and knifes into the backfield and throws guys and stuff, but it's not quite consistent enough. Even this year, he could still be a contributor and still give you something very positive, even if he has not reached his full potential yet. So would you take, if I told you and we don't know this, so this is the hard part of it, is that the risk might not work out. But if I told you he was going to be Dexter Lawrence by year 3, you'd probably be like, oh, I will be patient then. Right? But the thing about a development project is a little bit like you're sitting at a restaurant and they tell you, yeah, so it's going to be a little while for your meal. Is that okay with you? And you're like, yeah, if it's good, but you don't know if it's going to be good when it actually comes out. And that's kind of the way it is with someone like Caleb Banks. I was of two minds on draft night. I thought that Banks was a very risky pick because of the injuries, because I didn't love what I saw overall in terms of getting just wiped out, which we've seen him do in these games as well. But I also think the positional value is really right. Because that, if you have that, it's worth its weight in gold. I shot you 99. If McCarthy ends up being QB3 in the event Murray gets injured long term, is there a situation where they would decide to start him over Wentz just because? Yeah, I think so. That's how I would do it. Kind of depends on the part of the season, where your team is at. But if you ended up with, let's say, week 3, Murray has a season-ending injury, and you're looking at playing the whole season. I mean, yeah, I guess you could go to Carson Wentz, but how long can that really go on? You would probably just rather have JJ McCarthy, and you can figure out not only what you have, but I think there is a higher potential ceiling there where we know exactly what is going to happen if you play Carson Wentz, which is some games that are pretty good. It's more of a 500 type of record at absolute best, where at least with McCarthy's athleticism, with his penchant for throwing down the field, if some things click, he makes some plays, maybe protects the ball better, and then you get to really know by the end of the season, there's value in that for Nolan Teasley as well. But I don't know. I mean, I don't know what way that Kevin O'Connell would go if Carson Wentz is QB2 in game number 1, what that means about what they would do in a longer term scenario. Jake says, I like Claiborne, but putting the ball on the ground with this defense is unacceptable. For sure, that's true. I think that with Claiborne, it just is going to take work on contact balance, work on dealing with how hard NFL players hit you. Now, you went to Wake Forest. I don't know how many times anyone put a hand on him, but every time he runs into someone, it's just sort of like to the ground. And that's something that I think the best running backs in the league are really, really good at, is making more out of that first hit. So you take a hit and you get 5 more yards after, 3 more yards after. That's something I didn't see a lot from Claiborne. And then I also thought he was just rushing it a little bit, where some of those plays, we see Aaron Jones pace it really well. I think pacing in sports is underrated, where it's like, if you're playing Madden, you're not just mashing the X button down for your guy to run as fast as he can into the back of everybody. You're kind of waiting and then hitting the acceleration button when you see that space, or at least those of you who are very good at Madden, I would say. Scamping Around says, I'll be here when Banks is part of the Purple People Eaters. He's going to improve and be a problem. Yeah, I mean, look, like, that's the thing. We don't really know what the ceiling exactly is going to be. We just know what it could be. And if it ends up working out, that it's going to be scary. And it just might take a little while to get there. And that's the trouble, right? It's like, if I tell you that he becomes Dexter Lawrence or Chris Jones, then you'd say, all right, well, I will just sit here and wait for that very patiently and I'll be totally fine. It's just that you kind of don't know if that's what's behind the door. And then there are players like Gervin Dexter who are this big, who are just sort of good sometimes and not good other times, which is what I expect from Caleb Banks early in his career. Son of Beavers, I could see them keeping Bell so that the Dolphins don't try to grab him. Yeah, the Dolphins need just about anything and everything. There might be a team that looks at Dylan Bell and sees that explosiveness and says, you know what, like, let's put in a ticket for that guy and pick him up. But what you have to do, though, and you're right, the Dolphins should just be looking at anybody and everybody. But what you have to do is put the guy on the 53-man roster. So these teams have all gone through their 53s. They've looked at everybody, and are they going to, and this is why it just doesn't happen that much, the poaching is, are you going to say, well, this player that we drafted or we have as a UDFA, we're going to get rid of him and grab somebody else's? Just, they're not usually willing to do that. If you could grab people and put them on your practice squad, it would be chaos. But having to use a 53-man roster spot makes me think, probably not going to lose Dylan Bell. But I have liked what I've seen when he's gotten the ball in his hands. And he caught the ball the other day quite well from Carson Wentz. Mr. Mayor, I think there's a better option out there than Claiborne, discounting his 1 9-yard run on Saturday. The rest of his runs, 7 for 9 yards, which is 1.28 per carry. I love that you went to the next decimal. It just has not really been impressive in the games. And there's a little bit of the jolt, and you see it in training camp. But the thing about training camp is they can't tackle you. And you do wonder, if they were tackling you, if some of those runs wouldn't look as good. I think that the juice is real. The speed is real. It's just learning how to play in the NFL. You need maybe an off season to put on a lot more strength, learn to kind of run through some of these tackles. I don't know if he's ever going to be a 215-pound guy. I think one of the main reasons he was not a higher draft pick is that he is like 180 something pounds. And you just don't see a lot of 180 pound type of running backs. I mean, Devon Achan's, I think, up over 200 pounds. Like, you just don't see a lot of 180 pound running backs because it's very hard to plow through people and get those extra yards. So I think that one's going to take a little bit of time, and we shouldn't judge entirely. Like, he's not running behind Christian Darrisaw. He's not running behind Brian O'Neill. In real games, he would be, and he would get more space and you could give him a pitch, but the pacing doesn't seem quite right to me. As far as kind of like speeding up and running right into the tackles as opposed to letting things happen. So I think that eventually Damon Claiborne can get there, but right now he's a little bit on the raw side. So Xavier Scott, or maybe potentially getting someone else. Son of Beavers, Matt Latour, whom we signed today, was a rookie minicamp tryout. Well, that means, Beavers, you're paying very, very close attention. And he was indeed. And he might end up being like a practice squad guy. I mean, if you're signing people at this point of the year, they're not making the team. It is possible that you like them enough in a week to throw them on the practice squad, but even still kind of unlikely. A lot of times it's just, we need someone to play. Like, they might not even play Gavin Bartholomew in this game. We need somebody to get out there in the fourth quarter of this football game. That's what often happens at this time of year. Sean says, don't think it's a coincidence that 86 caught a nice tight end screen when Wentz came in the game. JJ's struggle hindered 86's opportunities in the preseason game. Yeah, I think that's true for all the wide receivers with some of the inaccuracy and timing issues. But in the practices, he really did have a good start to the offseason. It seemed like every single day he was catching a pass. It's slowed down a little bit, but I like what I see from a tools perspective, which is size, strong hands, athleticism, can adjust to go get the football. You did see there a yards after catch. And so even though he only has that one screen, there was some natural running ability for a guy of his size. I mean, I like what I see from Gavin Bartholomew. Mr. Mayor, no reason to keep longtime bench warmer Bird on the roster. Oh yeah, Henry Bird. Yeah, no one is going to poach him. You're right about that. And I think that spot with 9 offensive linemen at the beginning of the season, you can start with 9. Probably not any less than that, because if you had 2 guys go down in a game, you need to get them in there. You need some guys to come on to hold for or to block for field goals and stuff like that. So I would go with 9, and I imagine they'll have 8 on game day. But you're right that the poaching seems pretty unlikely for someone who's never played and is 27 years old. Let's see. Jake Bredesen is such a baller. I've liked everything I've seen from Max Bredesen. I think he's going to be a difference maker, and it's the one area where I admit to bias, pro fullback bias. I think that fullbacks are a dangerous weapon in any era of the NFL that no one wants to face. If I was a linebacker and I'm at 230 pounds, because that's kind of what a lot of linebackers weigh these days, and I looked over at that guy looking like a rhino, I'd be like, don't do this. I mean, the old school linebackers, they were like, let's meet in the hole and see who has more man. But not now. They don't want that now. And you feel like teams that are able to effectively use that fullback or extra tight ends, they can just impose their will at different times in a game. And Bredesen can also catch the ball too. I've seen him catch a number of balls out of the backfield, and they used to do this all the time. You would see a Lorenzo Neal. I mean, Larry Centers is a bit of an outlier, but you'd see like a Lorenzo Neal or a Vontae Leach or somebody. You'd see them go to the flat, and they would catch a ball and go 5 or 6 yards, a positive play. It's a completion. A William Floyd, for example, they would do that all the time. And I think with Bredesen, you can do that. Like, getting 5 or 6 yards on a play is a good play. So if you drop back and you don't like what you see and you're running a play action or something, just dump it off to that guy and have him run into somebody. Who is Patrick Ricard is who you're talking about, who plays for the Giants, the 300-pound offensive lineman who plays fullback. Very nifty guy. Very nifty. Joker, for 300 pounds, just incredibly agile. Joker says we signed Gilmore August 18th. Time to bring in the guy at the edge rusher. Yeah, it is getting a little late for that, for sure, for the edge rusher position if they're going to go there. But they also may have some ideas. These teams pay closer attention than we do to what every other team is doing. So they have people internally who are keeping a close eye on what other guys could get cut. Like, what are your odds of getting cut around the league and who would you pick up? So it's not Leonard Floyd or Hassan Reddick necessarily. It's Leonard Floyd, Hassan Reddick, and 12 other guys who maybe they like. They've scouted. They have kept a close eye on over the years that they might decide have a chance to get cut and they could go pick up, or even the potential trade that, we saw Daniel Falele get traded for a 6th round pick. So maybe there's something there, though I am not a big fan of the let's just get rid of all the day 3 picks, because that hasn't always worked out. Jax, love how Flores got to call exactly one defensive play last game and immediately dropped 315 pounds. Well, it wasn't Caleb Banks. It was Dominique Orange. Yeah, that he dropped back. Did he call that play? Just see Orange there with his mobility and the way that he got back and how quick his feet are. That has really jumped out to me. I was a bit surprised that Orange did not grade well by PFF, but I saw him kind of get washed out on a couple of plays, and maybe that was why. He didn't have a splash play, but there's a few times where you just see his footwork, his ability to get hands on somebody and what happens. So the rotation overall, if you're moving in Caleb Banks for a handful of plays to start, moving in Orange for a handful of plays, asking kind of a lot out of Levi Drake Rodriguez, who's looked really, really good in this training camp, asking maybe more than you would have expected out of Ty Ingram Dawkins, who's also made a lot of progress. Jalen Redmond is an excellent player. You have great linebackers. I think that can work, because we questioned a lot Jonathan Bullard, Jerry Tillery, can you really get enough out of those guys? And then they did. And I think that this group is better than that now that Redmond is playing all the time. Kit, very curious on your projected roster, who is a potential surprise cut a la Brian Robinson or Harrison Phillips. I have not talked about this at any point. If you guys have ideas, tell me, because I don't have ideas on this. I don't have a surprise player, which of course would make it a surprise. But in the past, I have, though we didn't see it coming with Harrison Phillips last year. In the past, we have gotten a sense of, this thing with Kendall Wright's not working out. Or even going back, I remember in 2017 talking about, Alex Boone, there's something going on there. Like, is he really going to stick around? They seem to like this Nick Easton guy. But who would be the surprise cut? They're not going to cut their starting center. They're not going to cut their veteran wide receiver who's looked fine in training camp, Jawan Jennings, who they just signed. There's actually not enough veterans. They're not going to cut Aaron Jones. They're not going to cut, they don't really have any veterans on the defensive line outside of Isaiah Loudermilk. They're not going to cut Eric Wilson. I don't know. I don't know if I have a name here. I really don't. I guess like Theo Jackson would be the biggest shock, but I don't think they're doing that either, because he's been a big special teamer and at least he played still like 60% of snaps last year. So if you guys got ideas, then let me know, because I don't have a surprise cut, even a guess at this point. Mr. Mayer, never throwing at Demings might be a good sign, especially during the Ravens game. They learned not to throw his direction in the joint practices. Yeah, he only got, according to PFF, he had 3 targets. There was 1 reception for like 5 yards, and that was it. He has been very good, very physical, a lot of making plays on the ball. I think that with him, it's just going to be, in terms of whether he's cornerback 3 or 4, is do you trust him with all the communication stuff, all the complexities of the defense? I would assume that James Pierre is going to be that guy first, and then see what happens. If he struggles, then you have Demings. But the fact that he's even gotten those first team reps tells you that he's made it interesting, which I didn't expect necessarily to happen coming from Stephen F. Austin, but he is a good enough athlete. He's physical enough, hardworking enough to be in that conversation, which, when you sign a veteran, you don't think that's going to happen. Mike, as good as the Vikings defense has looked under Flores, concerned with how elite quarterbacks have handled them. If pressure doesn't get home, they get carved. I don't know if Jakobe Thomas, by the way, would be a surprise cut. I don't think that would be a shock. He has been on the team, but I don't know if that would be, it doesn't fall under the same category as a B-Rob or a Harrison Phillips. As far as playing against elite quarterbacks, that is why they're elite, is that they often do have good games against all sorts of defenses. It's kind of the telltale sign of whether someone is actually elite would be the fact that Matthew Stafford can go out there and play against the Seattle Seahawks defense, which demolished everybody, and still have a great game. But you're right. At times, I would say that, Chicago and Caleb Williams, if he takes another step, that's pretty scary because Ben Johnson has had answers. I don't know that any defense, if there's no answers whatsoever, unless you just have 11 freaky talents. And there's a couple teams that do. That would be the Texans, the Broncos, and the Seahawks. And I think that the Rams are pretty darn close. So maybe 4 to 5 teams are just totally stacked across the board. Everything is great on a weekly basis, though their talent's better than your talent. That's not been the case for the Vikings. I still don't think it's the case for the Vikings. It's more of a sum of their parts. It's more of Brian Flores is going to out-scheme you. He's going to frustrate you. He's going to take risks, and they've got to pay off. But yeah, there are times where they have got by some really good quarterbacks. Justin Herbert last year had a great game against them, and Jared Goff has in the past, and Caleb Williams has had some good games against them. So I don't think it's going to be a perfect defense. They do face a lot of really good quarterbacks throughout this year. It's a lot of second-tier quarterbacks, but I also think that they've had some really good performances against Jordan Love, against Jared Goff, against Caleb Williams. So it's going to be good enough to give you a chance in most games, but whether you could face off with the best of the best will kind of depend on how certain guys progress. How much do you get out of those rookie defensive tackles and the developing defensive tackles? How good is the safety position, right? Like how healthy do your linebackers stay who are on the older side? Health is going to be a huge, huge thing there. Mr. Mayor, there's a lot of guys I'd cut before Jakobe Thomas. I mean, he's just been good. You're right about that. The only reason that I put a question mark with Jakobe Thomas is only because I'm like, wow. I mean, didn't see this one coming. Just assumed he would be a practice squad guy at the beginning, and then all of a sudden he emerges. It's been one of the cooler stories to see. Joker, a little worried about Jacob Roberts getting scooped. That could happen. I mean, when you make plays in a preseason game, and he does have a little previous experience, that someone might have linebacker depth issues and go, make a move. But I do think that he has a chance if they decide to keep 5 linebackers instead of 5 corners. Zamaya Vaughn was the guy I felt the least confident about. There is a spot there, and I do not know who it belongs to. I went with Vaughn because I think he's had a pretty good training camp, and he's someone that they've developed over 2 years. He's got length. I think he could play special teams. They had him out there in that cornerback position on punt coverage. But I don't really know. I mean, Roberts could be the guy that they decide to keep around because he has been good in the preseason and made plays. Mr. Mayor can't imagine the difference between the 5th best punter in the league and any different than the 25th best outside of the top couple worst. Who cares? I'd say keep Hecker. Well, come on, Mayor. There's a difference, but how much? Yeah, is hard to say because just booming the ball, when you look at those statistics, maybe this is the way to put it. Instead of like the 5th versus the 25th, it's that the statistics don't always tell the best story. Like if you could have a bunch of inside the 20 punts that are at the 18 or at the 5, well, which is better, right? You can have maybe depending on where you line up. So last year, Hecker was not great, but I mean, if they were punting out of their own end because he was playing for Tennessee all the time versus maybe with the Vikings, a lot of your punts are coming closer to midfield. That touch is going to matter a heck of a lot more. But truly, it's the holding is I think the most important thing. Who he feels most comfortable with when it comes to holding. 54th guy, Mayor, it's Jacob Roberts. Yeah, I mean, he's made, at least for me, he's made enough plays. And Ben Urasic, those two guys would both be right there, that if you had one extra spot, that's who I would kind of go with. Beavers, when it comes to the FanDuel question of the day, which is that the Cleveland Browns somehow, after naming Deshaun Watson as their starting quarterback, their over-under is still 6.5, which actually surprises me because I think the Cardinals is 4.5 over on FanDuel. And are they the bleakest franchise in the entire league? If not, who is? So Beavers says, looks over at the Cardinals who make their players pay for food and might go 1-16. Yeah, but if they go 1-16 and they get Arch Manning, at least they'll have 2 top 5 draft picks on their offense, but they spent it on a running back, which, yeah, okay, they deserve a lot of bleakness to them there. Jax says, Vikings fans who bemoan our team, y'all need to realize that there are teams out there like the Jets, Browns, Raiders, etc., who have it much, much, much worse. Oh, there's no question about it. Yeah, I think if you're a Raiders fan, you're finally a little excited. Maybe I think the Jets actually have a good roster if some of these young players click, and Geno Smith, but they need a quarterback at some point. But their roster actually is coming together, and the Jets have had this ability to put together good rosters through the years. The Browns, it feels like they just haven't done a thing. They wasted all of Myles Garrett's career and all of Joe Thomas's career. Imagine having two of the greatest players in the history of the National Football League, and you can't even get those guys to the playoffs. You can't even get them a playoff. I mean, Garrett probably has one, would have been the Baker Mayfield game, and I think Thomas had no trips to the playoffs his entire career. That's insane to have those players and not be able to do it. Mr. Mayor, Browns are the worst franchise for sure, facing karma for what's going on with Watson and throwing out Baker, who was one Nick Chubb play away from beating the Chiefs, or one, you could say, Chad Henne play away, one Chad Henne scramble away. But you're right that Baker Mayfield was probably treated poorly there. I think he tried way too hard to play through injury and then didn't get along with Stefanski, and just a mess, as it always is in Cleveland. Purple Kool-Aid, you said you missed the projection. You can go back and look. You can. Feels like if we keep 4 corners and 6 safeties, we're going to need to play a lot of big nickel. 1 injury, and we have an emergency at corner. Jay Ward can play corner. Kind of looks to me like he is beefed up a little bit to play that big nickel position. He can, in a total pinch, play the outside cornerback position. But you are right that if you got an injury there, somebody goes down, you're probably having to bump somebody up from the practice squad. So that was part of my thinking, is that you'd prefer 5 corners, but they have gone with 4 before. So that gave me a little bit of hesitation. But if you have Zemiah Vaughn on the practice squad, you could always just bump him up. And I don't really know who the other corners are going to be outside of that. Joker, nice to have people hate on the Browns again. Just because you're a loser doesn't mean you're lovable. Yeah, it's kind of the problem. It's like they could have at least been sort of interesting to tune into if they had Shadur Sanders, just to see how it goes on. Just to see what goes on with him at quarterback. Kit, Brown's certainly the most depressing over the long haul, but the Cardinals feel about as poorly run of a franchise from top to bottom. Would agree with that. Mr. Mayor, Cardinals might be more depressing because no one cares about them. That is true. They are just as pathetic, but never even make the headlines for it. Purple Kool-Aid, we can always play revisionist history and go back and say we would have drafted somebody that panned out. Just because a player works out well with one team doesn't mean that they will work out with another. The draft is one of the most complicated things in the entire universe. In all of the world and stratosphere, maybe more complicated than space. Because you have no idea once a guy gets into the NFL environment how it's going to work out. I was looking back at Jakobe Thomas's college career, and his PFF grades were good. Played for James Madison. He made some plays. He's a good tackler. There isn't a whole lot on that sheet that tells you, on the stat sheet, that this guy is going to step right into the NFL and get it, which is really crazy because he's looked like he's been in the NFL for years when he's out there playing safety. He's moving back and forth, but pre-snap, he's communicating, he's making plays. You're like, that's an NFL player. If you didn't know where anyone was drafted, just walked out there, you'd be like, oh, that's an NFL safety. You wouldn't know he was an undrafted free agent from James Madison. But there are other guys that we've seen who are first-round draft picks who immediately you'd be like, what is that guy doing out there? And there was one in 2022 who you immediately knew was just moving at slog speed when it came to reading and reacting and making plays in practice. How is anyone supposed to figure out this game? So it works for quarterbacks too. Joker, 5 snaps a game for Caleb Banks seems like a lot right now when every other defensive tackle is currently better. I think it's about the scenario, the situation where you put in someone like Caleb Banks in a certain spot where, let's say that it's 3rd down and 12. So he comes in 3rd down and 12. And what you want him to do is just push the offensive guard back as much as he can to create a lane, or just beat him one-on-one. Like, we're going to create a one-on-one for you. Just beat him. Just get to the quarterback. I think that's, I mean, look, maybe you get to the goal line or something and you want to have Caleb Banks for just the pure size back there. Like, I think that what they're going to do is work it in slowly, and we'll kind of have to assess by quarters of the season. Like, okay, through those first 4 games, where is he at? And then through the next 4 games, what's it look like? It just, yeah, it's a little bit harder than getting to open your present on Christmas Day, even though this draft class has offered a lot to look at. And I think players that will have roles on the team, but it is, I think, probably frustrating. Like, on draft day, you could say, oh yeah, he's a project and he's going to take time because he's got a foot injury. And then you arrive here and you're like, what the hell? I do get the feeling for sure, but I think he is going to play. I'm going to guess probably 15 snaps per game in the first quarter of the season. Let me again remind you that FanDuel question of the day is that the Browns have an over-under of 6.5. Are they the most, what was the word that I wrote down? The most bleak team in the entire NFL. So over on FanDuel, 6.5 for the Browns today. I would be taking the under for sure. And also want to tell you about my friends over at Brooklyn Bedding. The Aurora Lux mattress that I have has been a game changer for me, total life changer, because when you sleep well, you feel great, you're more energetic, the spine is not hurting, the lower back's not hurting. Every morning I wake up, I feel much better than I did before when I had my previous mattress. And like, just knowing that I bought something that's going to be this way for a long time, it's made in the USA, was pretty cost effective, but also built for long-term durability, which is great. And the craftsmanship really matters when it comes to mattresses for sure. And one of the great parts about Brooklyn Bedding is, you know, we were able to get exactly the shape and size and softness that we wanted. And it's just worked out awesome. But they offer a lot of different mattresses for every body type, sleep style, all that stuff, even in hard to find sizes. So we were able to get exactly what we wanted. And Brooklyn Bedding can get you a 120 night comfort trial. So, you know, if you don't love it right away, you can still give it some time, because I think your body takes time to adjust to a new mattress. But if you decide it's not working out, you can swap it or return it hassle-free. It's a huge part of their business plan to make sure you get the right thing. So go to brooklynbedding.com, use my promo code PURPLE, 30% off site-wide. That is brooklynbedding.com/purple for 30% off. Okay, back to your comments. All right. So yeah, I know it is very hard to talk about patience with the first round player. Son of Beavers, I do think there's a chance Theo Jackson gets cut or traded. I would say that is plausible if they like these other guys, but Jackson does have a lot of experience in the system. So I would be surprised. He also plays a lot of special teams. I think that they would have to be totally enamored with Jakobe Thomas in order to just move on from Theo Jackson at a position that they're not really sure about. Purple Kool-Aid, in addition to prior comment about corners, Joey Porter Jr. and the Steelers are at an impasse. I think it's worth kicking the tires. I think that they'll get there with Joey Porter Jr. I mean, my answer is going to be, of course, just check in and see, because you have a really good starting pair of corners right now, but into next year, you don't know what's going to happen with Isaiah Rodgers and even Byron Murphy Jr. It's a little bit unclear, where he's going to go, just because his contract gets more expensive after this year. I don't think they're going to trade him, though. I mean, the Steelers want to win. They brought back Aaron Rodgers. They're not really in a position to be trading away one of their best players, but that, deadlines make deals and they need to get that done. Purple Kool-Aid, I think them not playing Sanders has more to do with them not wanting to hear anything when they draft a quarterback in the first round next year. If that's what they're doing, they are dumb as hell. I mean, the odds are pretty strongly against Shedeur Sanders just showing up and rocking it and putting together some incredible season. I mean, I guess you could say if they're trying to tank, then Deshaun Watson's the right tank commander, that he could take you all the way to the bottom to where you can get one of those top quarterbacks. But I would just prefer, if I were them, because Sanders is still under contract, to see what you have there with Sanders in a situation where you are not trying to win. Like when people were bringing up, hey, you got to find out what you have in JJ McCarthy. My thing is, well, they brought in Kyler because they're trying to win. Like, this is a good team and they can win the division. The Browns can't win the division with Deshaun Watson. It's just not possible. They don't have enough talent. We don't even know what Todd Monken is as a head coach. They've given away one of the best players of all time. I mean, like, right? It's not looking that great. The division is not that easy. You got 3 other competent, if not good teams in that division. So they are in the perfect scenario to start Shedeur Sanders and see where it takes them. I also think, too, that if you're in Cleveland, you would kind of be interested in showing up to see Shedeur Sanders, even if it's good, bad, or ugly, right? There were times last year where he did throw for 300-something yards. It's kind of fun. At least it might be entertaining. He might go like Jameis style because he likes to throw the ball down the field. Who knows, right? But at least you're showing up to the stadium thinking, all right, we don't know what's going to happen here with Shedeur Sanders. I have no idea how anyone in the entire city of Cleveland can walk up to that gate and have them ring up the ticket and walk in and at all, and watch this garbage. Like, I just have no idea how. Nano Joe, they have a grandpa at head coach. Yeah, I think he's one of those sort of brought in to get fired, I think, right? And yeah, Purple Kool-Aid bringing that up with like Gerard Mayo and the Pats. Like, that's what it seems like. You get to have a job for a year as a head coach, and then you get fired. Jim, if both punters are adequate, do you park one on the practice squad? 100%. I would put on the practice squad Brett Thorson. Yeah, for sure. Because you have the international exception, so you can have a 17th practice squad player. It's a lot of lockers to have in the locker room, but they can fit them. So I would do that. He's shown a lot, and he has successfully held for some long kicks for Will Reichard. I wouldn't be terribly shocked if he does make the team, but because of the International Pathway Program, it's a free spot. Yep, as Mr. Mayor says, totally free spot, so go ahead. Gatino's Christmas channel, Wentz is what he is, and it's not enough. At least McCarthy has a slim chance of getting better. If you're talking about the longer term, if there was a scenario where you'd have to play longer term, I do agree with that McCarthy can be a playmaker. He could scramble, he can run, he can throw the ball, down the field and make some big plays and potentially get better as he goes along. At least the potential's there. Although, after the other day, I had the same thought everybody else did when he got banged up and couldn't play the full game, which is if somebody can't get rid of the football like he's had so much trouble with for his entire career, is he going to be able to stay healthy? Like, does he just need a year of not playing to really learn this? Because he got banged up in a preseason game where the pass rush shouldn't even really be getting there, but and they were bad on the offensive line. But again, that's sort of the same old story of like holding on to the ball too long. Thank you so much, Jim, for the super chat. Really appreciate you, dude. And I'm glad you enjoyed Tank Commander. I did not invent it, though. I've seen that one on Twitter before where people are called the Tank Commander for bad quarterbacks. Jim, looking at 2027 opponents, we need to put together a solid season this year. Next year might be brutal. I'm not in 2027 yet, Jim. I'm not in that mode. But this year's schedule does have its perks for the Vikings. And one of them is that you don't have to play San Francisco in San Francisco. And the other one is that you have 9 home games. Because next year you're going to have 9 away games, and that is harder. Because you get to play at home, you get to the defensive advantage for Flores, I think is significant. The advantage for Kyler Murray to play inside, I think is significant. You get to play also Chicago, not in bad weather, and Lambeau, probably not in bad weather. I mean, there's always the potential for some crazy storm. Did you know there was a storm in Halloween? Isn't that it? Isn't it the Halloween storm or something that everyone talks about? But more likely than not, it's not in January. It's not in December. So you get to play in Lambeau where it's probably going to be decent weather. There's a lot of things that fit, I think, really well for having a good season. Whereas next year, you never know how that's going to play out. But it's hard to predict right now with schedules. Purple Kool-Aid, if you have to wait till year 3 for a defensive tackle to develop, but then he's a stud, you're talking about saving $30 million against the market and having a game wrecker. Safeties can be found and are much cheaper. Yeah, I mean, they just found one as a UDFA who looks pretty decent. I totally agree with that. There are 10 safeties a year that you can get for $10 million or less that can come in and play for your football team. Whereas find me a $30 million defensive tackle. Find me even a good defensive tackle who's not getting paid. They are all very expensive. We saw that from Hargrave and Allen. Those guys were over the hill, and still they cost an arm and a leg to get them. Even if you're right, even if you had only year 3 and year 4 of that guy with the advantage, this is a position that is increasing every year in its expense. So I think that's a really good point. Mike, thinking of quarterback journeys, can't imagine a tougher one than Kurt Warner. Then he got the keys to the greatest show on turf. The fortitude to bounce forward is amazing, and that's what it takes. And, you know, there's something hardwired into Kurt Warner's brain where that guy knew how to throw an anticipation ball, probably as good as anyone in history, so much touch, just a magician with the football. But it did take time, and there are quarterbacks where it takes time and it doesn't work out. But, you know, there are quarterbacks where it does eventually. And I don't know which way it's going to go with JJ McCarthy. I just think that there was kind of a resignation feeling from everyone after the game the other day, where it was like, yep, if this stuff is still happening, if it still looks the same after this long, this is going to take longer. This is not going to be just freshman year to sophomore year, he just shows up and he's totally different. Like there's a lot of work that's going to have to be done for him. Bumbaclat, do you envision them signing a preseason quarterback or Brosmer plays the whole game? I would think that Brosmer would play the whole game, but I mean, if they were going to do it, they would have to do it soon. Like by today, I would have thought, to get somebody else in. I suppose you could always bring someone in just for game day. I don't know if like the back end of the roster, if they want to move somebody out or if they have an idea there, or maybe just have Carson Wentz with a helmet just in case, because Wentz could always just go in, hand off, whatever. I would have expected that they would bring somebody in by today or maybe tomorrow if they're going to try to get them ready to even just put a helmet on and be the backup. But you know, maybe we'll have to see. I would be surprised if they brought someone else in. I think you just play Max Brosmer the entire game, or maybe have Wentz start it and run a couple series. I'd probably just play Brosmer the entire game. Let him get as much work as possible. First name, last name. Flores' ability to develop players is why I really hope we could find a way to keep him longer term, even if it means having to boot KOC. I know KOC is a great head coach, but his offenses have been meh. I don't necessarily agree with that. I mean, the 2024 offense, I believe, finished like ninth in scoring without the left tackle the whole second half of the year, without the running game really the whole second half of the year because of that. And 2022 was not the greatest offense, but it was pretty clutch. And again, having to work around not having a good running back. This is maybe the first time that he'll have an offensive line going into the season healthy with a talented running back in Jordan Mason. Meh. When you say meh, like, yeah, overall, like the totality, 2023, first half of 2023 was pretty darn good. I mean, when they've had their starting quarterback, they've won a lot, which I think speaks a lot to Kevin O'Connell and his offenses. But has it been top 5? No. And until you have had a top 5 offense, like Jared Goff seems to have every single year, we definitely can't say, oh yeah, just plug anyone into this system and it'll just be magic. With Flores, I think he does want to be here long-term, from the family perspective, from the organization perspective, and you can't ask for a better situation with all the young players that he has. And then they're going to get cap space going into the future to be able to spend if they don't sign Kyler Murray. But, being able to build it really in his vision over these last 3 years, like it's not just, I was talking to somebody about this the other day. Like, it's not just that he has like a lot of talent for scheming and everything else. Now he has all these players that he's rigged the deck with where like he's picked them out and he's developed them in his own vision, which the way that coordinators bounce around all the time, you don't get to do that much, is to have 3, 4, 5 years. I think with the pending lawsuit, there is a very small chance he will get a head coaching job. And I just don't think that you're going to run into that problem. And I also think KOC is going to be here for a long time, but kind of depends on how things go. It shouldn't depend entirely on how things go this year, but everything in the NFL is kind of year to year. I just think as long as KOC's here, Flores will be, and even if something does change, he probably will continue to be based on how solid his position is, how well liked he is by the ownership, and how well he's developed the players. They appreciate that, how young the defense suddenly is across the board. All those things kind of line up. But yeah, I mean, I know some of the numbers in terms of like EPA and things like that, which have not been as high, the EPA per play. And I do think a lot of that is, some of the just very poor third down performances, third and short, the red zone stuff, not being able to run the ball in those key spots has really hurt in terms of EPA. In terms of their actual scoring, they have been pretty good, but defense does play into actual scoring totals. You guys messing around in the chat. Trust me, I got my Adam Schefter. On. So if there's my alert, so if something does happen during the live show, it'll alert me here on my phone. How about no says, don't get me wrong. I'm cautiously optimistic about the season. What would you say is the Vikings' most needed upgrade position? I'm in for spending some draft capital on O-line. We're at 2027 draft already. I mean, as of right now, looking at, you don't know if you need a quarterback or not. I mean, that's the one thing that we're going to be talking about the most is we're on future watch every single week. I mean, this might become a thing that we do after every single week is, all right, at the end of every post game, is Coller going to be the quarterback for next year? Who's the quarterback for next year? We might do that. We kind of got into that mode in 2023 after Kirk got hurt of like, all right, what do we think now? Is it Dobbs? Oh my gosh, it's definitely not Dobbs. Who is it going to be? But in terms of where this roster will need long-term, the offensive line, we'll see about Will Fries, but center is really the only position that they're in need of from right now sitting in this seat. I think it's continue to build on the defensive side, and also they're going to have to replace guys. They will have to replace if Van Ginkel goes. They'll have to replace if Cashman goes. They'll have to replace if Hawkinson goes. What do you do at tight end? What do you do at edge rusher? I think more pass rush. Just look at who your GM is. Look at what Seattle did. More pass rush, more pass rush, more pass rush. And I could certainly buy into that as a strategy. Ricky, can we let the season play out at this point? What more can you do? Ricky, yes, but also we do the show all the time. So we're going to try to project and predict and analyze everything we possibly can. But yeah, we have to let it play out, and we'll see a lot of these things come to fruition. Like when you're talking about Caleb Banks, at this moment, we're trying to project what it's going to look like. But we really don't know. I mean, we're trying to project it based on, it's been pretty mediocre in these preseason games. Hasn't really totally jumped off the page in training camp. But it's also possible that when they start scheming, that it's going to look different. Scheming different techniques, scheming different scenarios for him to maybe create one-on-ones, and all he has to do is win one and throw a guy and get a sack, and then all of a sudden everyone's in, right? So you never really know till they get out there. We have reached the point, though, I'll save this for Wednesday, but we have reached the point, though, where we're getting toward official vibe check, because after Wednesday, practices are closed. So that is the official end of training camp, though more or less it ended with the end of joint practices, but the official end is on Wednesday. So I think after Wednesday's practice, which I'm guessing is not going to be a super hard one, that'll be the preseason vibe check podcast, which we've done kind of every year, where I kind of like, all right, here's how I'm feeling. And I will admit that I was not correct about last year's, where I thought that McCarthy was going to work out pretty well. And then I thought that I did think the defense was going to be great. I don't think they turned out quite as good in the first half as I thought they were going to be. And I thought they were going to be a playoff team. So I did miss on that one. I've been right in previous years. So we'll do that on Wednesday. We are getting that point. That's funny. Okay. Now you're being funny, Greg, is they could go back to McCarthy has college eligibility, but what a goofy world that is. Speaking of which, in maybe a few minutes here, I talked to Andrew Brandt, former VP of the Packers, about his new book, but a lot of great stories and great intel on what it's like to negotiate a quarterback contract. So that is coming up very shortly. Grant, we should get a nickname for Banks and Orange like we did for the Williams Wall. What would your name be? I'm not sure. I think you have to earn it, though. You do have to earn it. But there's potential there. I would just have to think about it. I mean, Big Citrus, the thing about Big Citrus is that it's just so good. Like, one of the guys has such a good nickname that I don't know if you can use both of them together. Well, we'll think about it. We'll try to think about it. And if you guys have a nickname, let me know. So East Minnesota Mark has Tyler Batty been making noise? I thought he was really good in the preseason game, and I think that they have liked him the entire time as somebody who does have enough quickness and physicality to get into the backfield. I don't think that he has like the lightning to him of a pure pass rusher, but he seems like a guy that they have been kind of on since last year. And when you see him, straight beat a tackle and get to the backfield, you kind of go, oh, I could see this a little bit more. He may be a reason that they haven't gone out to get anyone else. Romaine says, should we be concerned about the center position? The snaps over the last few practices have been much better. That's all I can report. You are until you're not, is when it comes to players like this. Like, I think that Blake Brandel has been fine in this training camp, save for some bad snaps, which have to get fixed. And Kevin O'Connell was pretty clear about that the other day. It was like, yeah, we have a few weeks to get this corrected, but it better get corrected. You got to be able to snap that football. I think his blocking for pass protection is pretty good. He is not facing, the best pass rushing defensive tackles in the league. Even with the Ravens, they were running out there Travis Jones, who's really huge, but he's not like the quickest to get in the backfield. But I think what we saw last year was reasonable after his first two games were pretty tough from Brandel. So concerned, yes. Terrified, I would not go terrified yet. I would just go with, you're going to be concerned until he totally proves it. I don't know who you're talking about, the Armon Watts of 2026, but remember Armon Watts. Anytime you guys want to throw out a random guy, that is totally fine. First name, last name, keep someone over Ivan Pace might be a surprise cut. It would be a little surprising. But Harrison, the question was about like Harrison Phillips. That was really shocking. That they would trade him away. I was like, really? Wow. Like a guy who had been such a staple and who they probably shouldn't have gotten rid of. That was really surprising. But Pace to me has just fallen out of favor. I mean, he's not even the first guy off the bench if someone gets hurt. So that would not be as much of a surprise. Theo Jackson, I think, would be a surprise because he has been someone they've liked and developed for some time. And then to get to this point and, toss him aside, would really mean that they just felt like it never got there and they want to see younger players. But he's been mostly first team this entire time. That would be a surprise. Purple Kool-Aid have a strong dislike of the Rams, but part of me wants to see Aaron Donald come back just so I can watch him play football again. I think you're saying that because he's not playing the Vikings this year. I feel the same way. I mean, a great player like Charles Haley did this. Chris Dolman, I think, right, came out of retirement. It's pretty cool when it happens, especially if the guy could still bring it. Maybe a little less so with Phillip Rivers last year, which was sheer insanity for him to come out of retirement. But I think someone brought this up with Aaron Donald where they play in Australia in week 1. Why would you do that? Why would you sign and go to Australia when you could sign in week 2 and then just come and play? BM, when the Bengals and Chargers underperform again, the Vikings are going to sell the future on one of them. It'll be a repeat of the Kirk years. I mean, if they got Joe Burrow, I think the ceiling goes higher than where it was with Kirk. With Herbert here, I still have this thing with Herbert where I feel like he doesn't play to his actual potential or his physical potential, where it's more short stuff and checkdowns and not enough scrambling and not enough playmaking, where it can be absolutely spectacular, but there's just long stretches where it doesn't happen. And he sort of plays like Kirk Cousins. And then everyone tells you how awesome it was, but you're like, I don't really know if it was. Or if you just thought that his one really good throw was super cool because he's got a really strong arm. He's been a very good quarterback. And if he played for the Vikings, I'm sure he'd be excellent. But he's always left me with a little bit to be desired. High boy time. Banks is a little out of shape. Looked at. Well, I mean, think about this. Out of shape sort of suggests that you have not been working hard enough and you're just like lazy or something. But that's not really what's happened here, where Caleb Banks did not have those months where guys spend getting their bodies ready for the season. That would be your May and June after and July leading up after, OTAs and minicamp and everything. Guys spend a lot of time working on their body to get them ready for that. He didn't have that because of the foot injury. And then they get right in and they start taking all these first team reps. The pads come on. They're taking rep after rep after rep. They're getting ready for the season. And he didn't have that either because he was still playing catch up from behind. So out of shape, yes, but not because he didn't do his work. It was because of the foot injury that set him back. And that's why I'm talking about, let's kind of check in after 4 weeks. Let's check in after 8 weeks with him, because if he does get back into that full playing shape, and you saw a little bit of it last week, but he also worked his tail off last week. They had him almost every other rotation out there during joint practices for 2 very hard days against the Ravens, a lot of first team work, and then said, go play 25 snaps in the game. So there was a lot there. Gatino's Christmas channel, you should never worry about a practice squad player getting scooped up. They do, because you invest in these guys and you develop them. And there are practice squad players who have become NFL starters before. Josh Metellus is one of them. So you don't really want to lose players. It is overstated, though. I agree with you if you're saying it's overstated. There's no question that it's overstated. Norse Force, how did Jakobe Thomas go undrafted? Absolute gem, number 39. I think it's just James Madison, and maybe people didn't pay a lot of attention to James Madison's pro day. He actually did have a very good pro day and was sought after, but this question always kind of comes up when a UDFA works out, because you're like, weren't they drafting punters and like guys from other countries at the number whatever 256 pick, and they missed this guy? But it does happen sometimes. And I think the most interesting part about him is he does have the raw athleticism that is not quite where Harrison Smith was when he came out, but it's NFL level. Like, it's NFL starting level athleticism. And that's where it begins. Mike says Flores has certainly made the absolute most out of what he's had to deal with. Turner, Orange, Banks are headaches for opponents. And in the best case scenario, they certainly will be as development projects. And that's where he's had to be patient. Brian Flores and everybody else has. BM, would the 86 Bears defense be a top 10 unit in 2026? Do you mean 85 Bears? Well, I don't know if the 86 Bears were good too. I assume they were. But 85 Bears, which are, usually considered the best defense kind of ever, though I don't think that's quite right. The 1969 Minnesota Vikings might be the best ever. I think they allowed like 9 points a game. But anyway, with the 85 Bears, well, look, no, because they would, the joke is like, no, that they're like 80 years old now. But not if they were playing the athletes that are out there today, of course. But if we were talking about relative, just look at the construction, look how they played. Super, super aggressive, great pass rush, actually incredible pass rush, great coverage. It's always going to be the case that in any era, anytime, if you have great players, good to great players at every single position and no weaknesses, which the 85 Bears had, you are going to win. The Ravens are like this in 2000. They're the team that gets brought up a lot. Seattle this year, where was their weakness? They were healthy across the board. The Seahawks that were the Legion of Boom, where was their weakness? They could get after the passer. They could stop the run. They had sideline to sideline linebackers, rangy safeties, long and physical corners. It's crazy that the model to win the Super Bowl is to have the best team across the board, right? But it really is. You have to have a lot of things work out to get there, but it really is. You can't have too many weaknesses. High boy time. Jay Ward is going to have an awesome season. I really liked what I've seen from Jay Ward. I do agree with that they have developed him over 3 years. That's really the story of this camp, is that we're seeing some of the development that has come to fruition over years that they've put into it. And that's why, we talk about, like, you're going to have to give some things time, and it's never all that easy to do, but you have to do it. Dean says you'd vote for the Dolphins being the bleakest team in the FanDuel question of the day. Bleakest for 2026, not the bleakest long-term though. because I like what they've done. They're going to set up their salary cap. Players will go play in Miami who are free agents. That's not the hardest sell in the world. And if they get a top draft pick quarterback, they had a ton of draft picks this year that they acquired. You could turn that around quickly. I look at the Dolphins as being where the maybe someone like Chicago was, or someone like Detroit a couple years ago, where if you just draft a million players because you got rid of everything and did a full teardown, you could be pretty good. That is not as bleak as Cleveland, where you're like, where does this thing even go if this is who you're turning your team over to? And Malik Willis could end up being pretty good. It's possible that he could. Let's see. BM says nobody cares about the Packers titles outside of the last two because they happened 1 or 2 generations ago. Yeah, I mean, those people do. It's a different kind of place. I shot you 99. Would you say Max Bredesen is Kyle Juszczyk? I would not. No, I think Max Bredesen is like John Ritchie. You remember John Ritchie just played for the Raiders in their heyday, their most recent heyday, not their heyday from the 70s, or they had a little bit of a heyday in the 90s, but like that, the Rich Gannon era where they were competitive all the time. John Ritchie was just huge. And he looked like a rectangle, just massive body, super strong, and was quicker than you'd expect, and was very physical and hard-nosed, and his head would be bleeding. Like, that's kind of Max Bredesen. He is very old school to me in the way that he looks and the way that he plays, and he can catch the ball if you need him to. Kyle Juszczyk is an undersized fullback who can play wide receiver, can play tight end, who you can give the ball to. You can have run down field. I don't think you're going to have Bredesen running downfield very much, but I think you are going to have him catching like those underneath things, like a Sam Gash type of fullback. I think he falls more into that. Let's see. I do have to, thanks Matt for checking in from the Lynx game. I'm going to jump off in a minute because I do want to see the end of that game. My wife is calling it on Victory Plus, but I also got to get to this, Andrew Brandt interview. Is very, very good, fun conversation with him. He just wrote a book. He's on Twitter. A lot of you have followed him and read his writing over the years. A great dude. Michael, I agree that Thorson has a good chance to be the punter in 2027. I do agree with that. Okay, well, so I think we've covered a lot of stuff. We're to the Indiana Bears now. Which I hope does not happen. I think that would be atrocious. I mean, it's like not that far away, but it's not right. It's not morally right. And I like have a love-hate thing with Soldier Field. It's not my favorite press box to go to, but it is got a great view of downtown. It's right there in the middle of the city. It's got this kind of haunting creepiness to it. I really hope that they don't end up changing. But who knows? That seems like that's a total mess, which maybe we'll end up with the Wolves. Okay, so appreciate everybody hanging around for a really good conversation. Thanks for the great chat. Just to let you know, they're going to practice tomorrow and Wednesday, so we will also do live shows after those two as well. And I will fulfill the promise to go live after every single Vikings practice for the entire summer. And that will, of course, not stop going live. I'm sure that I will do at least 3 times a week leading up to the season, maybe more than that. Jeremiah Searles is coming back. We're doing a fantasy show again every week. Dane Mizutani after games. Andrew Kramer hardcore breakdowns. Guests from Star Tribune, ESPN, The Athletic. We'll have the whole thing going on. It's going to be great for this season. And I'm even investigating if there's maybe one more addition I want to make. Also doing this cool show with Alec Lewis and Garrett Greenlee over on Vikings Collective. So it's going to be a lot of football talk. But I will leave you with this today. So look forward to all that stuff. I will leave you with my conversation with Andrew Brandt, again, former VP of the Green Bay Packers, wrote a book, and I asked him a lot about quarterbacks and negotiating contracts and what that's really like and where the bar would be for Kyler Murray. So enjoy the conversation with Andrew Brandt, and we will see you tomorrow. Football. All right, we welcome into the show very special guest, Andrew Brandt, former VP of the Green Bay Packers, a sports law professor, a former agent, a writer for Sports Illustrated and The Athletic, a podcaster. What else is there, Andrew? And now an author of a very cool book, which I spent my weekend with, called Smarter About Sports by Andrew Brandt, My Life Navigating Athletes, Agents, Media, and the Business of the NFL. Andrew, welcome to the show. How are you?
I'm doing well. Thanks for having me. I guess the one thing you didn't mention, or maybe you did, was that dominated my weekend, Matthew, is NIL consultant, because that world changed on Friday, or changed a week ago and then changed again Friday. And I'm dealing with players for my consulting, and I consult with schools. So I'm not on the player side. I'm on the quote unquote management side and doing NIL contracts. And lo and behold, I'm doing contracts with players this weekend who were not eligible to be signed last weekend. And I'm bringing on football players for a season that starts this week. It's just madness. As everyone knows, it's the Wild West. It's changing by the day. But that adds to not only my resume, but to my knowledge, because this is ground floor. You know, college sports is going to look different next year than it does now. It looked different last year. And I teach this stuff, and it's like groundbreaking. Like, we may never have a time in college sports like we have right now.
So I have to ask you about, a player coming to an NFL training camp, spending the entire summer with the Cleveland Browns, and then going back to college. I mean, there are no rules, it feels like, with how any of this works. But like, what did you make of that? Because I could see both sides of it. I mean, as a reporter covering so many players that leave college, come to the NFL, then realize they're not actually ready for the NFL, then they're just sort of on their own. I kind of didn't dislike the idea of them going back to college and being able to earn as much as they possibly could, when their earning potential on an NFL practice squad is not terrible. But if they don't make the 53 and nobody picks them up, then they're just out in the world again, when they could have earning potential back in college. But I can also see where people are like, wait a minute, you got to spend a summer with an NFL team developing, and now you go back to college? Like, that's not fair.
Yeah, I tweeted something on Friday that we may see NFL players go to their coaches and say, can you cut me now? Thinking they're probably going to be cut next week so I can get on with my college team. And of course, it happened. It happened Sunday night with Daquan White of the Browns saying, cut me now so I can go to LSU. And I sort of tweeted out, he's transferring from the Browns to LSU. Before people go too crazy with this, I'll try to explain in a nutshell. This is a limited number of players. Like, the NCAA started a 5-for-5 rule. No more red shirts, no more waivers, no more all this crap. And you play 5 years, 5 seasons. If you're hurt a year, you can play 4. If you're hurt 2 years, you play 3, whatever it is. And they did not include the 4-year players in this. So it starts fresh. And the 4-year players, as everyone now knows, follows sports, have been suing and suing and suing. And the state court plaintiffs seem to be winning, but there was a federal case that first the players won. Now the NCAA wins on the appeal phase, and those players are not in, but they're trying to get in other suits. Long story short, this is a limited number of players. Daquan Wright, there will be a few others, but that's all. This won't happen every year. This won't happen next year. This didn't happen last year. So let's lose some of the hysteria and say that this player going to LSU, maybe a few others go to other NCAA teams. That's it. That's it. And we're in this unique time where neither season has started yet. And basketball, you're still going to see this another couple months. And it's just this unique time in history again. And you know my saying, there will be lawyers. There are a ton of lawyers involved. For us on my side, it makes it chaotic. I just, got a note. I got to sign another player, now a women's basketball player. It's just, this is where we are.
Yeah. And, in one way, I love the idea that college players are able to make as much money as they could possibly get. Love the idea of the revenue sharing. I mean, if you think about, how much money did they make off like Tim Tebow's jersey when he was at Florida, and the fact that they could be looped into it? It's just, it feels like a lot of things that happen when there's a monumental shift, we have to figure out how all the details are going to work. And usually it's make all the mistakes and then try to correct them. And it feels like that's what's happening right now with that universe. But I spent the weekend with your book, and it was really, really enjoyable. I think my favorite parts, because you moved from the East to the Midwest. I also did that. I moved from Buffalo, New York to cover the Minnesota Vikings out here in the Midwest. I had never heard of a supper club either. And although we have probably different takes on food, because I loved all the meat and cheeses and stuff that are out here, in the Midwest. But I would love to know, because you got to the Packers in 1999. That is right after Randy Moss goes crazy in his rookie season. I would love to know what you guys were thinking in Green Bay in that front office about the Minnesota Vikings at the time that you arrived with the Packers.
Yeah, I had no experience in Green Bay or Wisconsin or the Midwest, but I went out there because I had, it was a crazy time. I was representing Ricky Williams, the great running back, and he was firing me for someone named Master P, and I was going crazy, like, what am I going to do now? I had other clients, but no one of the magnitude of Ricky Williams. But the Packers called out of the blue. Their coach, Mike Holmgren, going to the Seattle Seahawks, taking the guy who ran the business side with him. Packers called out of the blue, will you switch sides? And I came up and I said, very honestly, to Ron Wolf, don't take offense, but do I have to move here to do this job? And he said, no offense taken, but yes. And I did. And it was leaving the agent business. And I talk a lot in the book about what the agent business is really like, what the team side is like, contrasts and comparisons between the two, before I entered this next phase where I'm doing media and academia. It was unique. Green Bay is completely unique. There's never anything. I've been around sports my whole life, never seen a place wrap itself around a franchise like that. It became clear, who our rivals were. Obviously, the division rivals, Bears and Vikings, seemed to be elevated. And I sort of learned that very quickly. My experience playing Minnesota was that dome, that Metrodome. Oh, my God, that damn horn. And I know I'm pissing off a lot of people right now, but that just bothered me. And it was the only press box I went to in my whole career that was not enclosed. So you're basically sitting among the ambiance, whereas in every other press box, you have glass. You're sort of all muted audio-wise, and that was so loud. People don't think of the Metrodome in ways they think of other stadiums in terms of loud. But as someone who was used to sitting in a press box to watch games, that just was so loud. And yeah, we had some tough times in that dome. We had some great times in that dome. I remember a Christmas Eve game, I think, that we won, which made our Christmas so much great because we were not favored at all in that game. And yeah, playing against Moss and seeing Moss moon our fans in one playoff game. I mean, all of that with the Vikings. As an aside, when we played Minnesota, I'm a runner, and our team doc, Pat McKenzie, a runner, we would get to every city and throw our bags down and take a run, and loved Minnesota because we ran around the lakes. Pat was from there. He knew all the routes around these lakes, even in the cold. So that was always a favorite trip for us, going to Minnesota, taking that long run on Saturday afternoon.
Well, I don't know if you know this, but Alan Page still jogs when it's like 10 below. And
wow.
He will take pictures of himself with, the eyelashes with snow on them and everything else. He'll go out and jog around the lake. I also have learned to run outside when it's really, really cold, because you kind of have no other option other than to just stay inside for the entire winter. But, your front office when you arrived, I mean, it's kind of in a way become legendary. That time that you were there, I mean, there's a lot of, like, John Schneider was there, Brian Gutekunst was there at that time. So it kind of has this same feel of like that Belichick Browns front office where everybody just went on to do things. And with Nolan Teasley here, there's that connection with John Schneider with the Seattle Seahawks. And I'm just curious about, like, I don't know if you guys called it the Packer way back then, but a functional and successful front office, as the Vikings kind of enter a new world with Nolan Teasley as the general manager operating the front office. Like, what did you learn from that time about how a successful front office operates?
I say this, it's cliche, but staying in our lane, I just think the Packers are very it's obviously football first. There's no owner, so there's no money being diverted to yachts or other businesses or vacations. It's all goes back in the team. And the three parts of a football operation, coaching, personnel evaluation, and cap contract, I think we just work well together. They still do. It's just everyone's in their lane. And, coaches coach, scouts scout, and cap contract people like myself do what we do. And when I say in their lane, that doesn't mean we were coordinated. I think that the goal of every football organization is to have those three parties in line. For instance, when we interviewed coaches, whether it was Mike Sherman, Mike McCarthy, otherwise, like they had to know, you're coming to the Packers, I'm sure Matt LaFleur, you're coaching. You're not picking players. You're not lobbying for vets. We're a draft and develop team. You have to be ready to play young players, trust young players earlier than other teams. And that's the way it is. And from my viewpoint, we develop young players and sign them. We spend most of our payroll on signing extensions for young players, not quick fixes with free agency, as some teams do. And then there'll be a selective free agent now and then. I talked the long story about signing Charles Woodson, but it's the Packer way. And if you're going to be general manager of the Packer, you're coming from a scouting background. Well, Ted Thompson was a Ron Wolf disciple. Brian Gutekunst is a Ted Thompson disciple. The next GM will be a Brian Gutekunst disciple, as now in Miami with John Eric Sullivan, as now in Seattle with John Schneider. John Dorsey's been around, on and on and on. So that's the Packer way.
Yeah, and I really feel like when you look at Seattle and how they were built, it was drafting and drafting and drafting, and then the select trade for Leonard Williams, like get the right guy at the right time, where the Vikings have really struggled with this over the last, quite a long time, actually. The last time they rebuilt through a draft was when Mike Zimmer first got here, and then they drafted Anthony Barr and Teddy Bridgewater and Stephon Diggs and Danielle Hunter and all those guys, and then built up a team that went to the NFC Championship. But they've kind of been chasing that and failing in drafts. You mentioned like not wanting to give away draft picks, which the Vikings did a ton over the last few years. And now they're kind of playing from behind as Nolan Teasley arrives. But I think that that's going to be his philosophy here, is to slower build and have to ask the coaches to develop some young players themselves. But they will face a very interesting scenario, which you have been in yourself. Maybe not quite as complicated as your situation with Aaron Rodgers and Brett Favre, but you wrote about negotiations with Bus Cook, who represented Brett Favre, with Aaron Rodgers, even when he was coming in as a rookie. And the Vikings are going to face a situation potentially at the end of this year with Kyler Murray if he plays really well. I'm curious. One of the lines you had that was really great in the book was about negotiations are always personal. And I think that kind of may have happened with Arizona and Kyler, what some stuff came out that maybe shouldn't have. But I'm just curious about how you would approach that situation with a quarterback who may play 1 year here, may need a giant contract. If things work out, like that scenario for the Vikings, knowing that it can be difficult to manage the rest of your roster if you sign a quarterback to a big contract.
Well, the Vikings now have one of the great values in the history of the NFL. Starting quarterback making whatever he's making, $1 million, and the Cardinals paying the rest. That's just amazing. The best value, I think, in sports is a rookie quarterback in the NFL that's playing. Because instead of paying, 30, 40, 50 million with the peers, you're paying $2, $3, $4, $5 million. And imagine what else you can do with your roster with that money. I learned through the years that, again, these negotiations are extremely personal, no matter how much you say business. And what I learned in negotiating, I came in there and I'm a young guy. I'm a former agent. Players are like, hey, cool, I'll negotiate with him. I don't need to pay the agent fee. And I'm like, okay, sounds good. And I tell you, Matt, those were the worst negotiations, because I'm telling a young player, they're not as good as they think. They see it very simply. The Vikings paid that guy X. I'm better than him. Pay me more than X. And I'm like, well, that guy's a year from free agency, you're 2 years from free agency, or whatever it may be. And they're like, I don't get that. I'm better. So this was something I learned the value of agents, because you got to have a buffer. You got to have that role of an agent. And what you learn in football or any business, you got to get close. You got to have these relationships with agents. When I travel to Minnesota, Detroit, Chicago, wherever, I look up an agent in town and say, hey, you want to meet for a drink or dinner? I got nothing to do with the team, preparing for the game. So I would do that just so that relationship's there. And when the Vikings need that relationship with Kyler's agent, they're going to have it. And with all these deals, free agency is the biggest driver of earnings in sports. And I'm seeing that on the college side because those guys are perpetual free agents. Get in front of it. My goal was always get to them early. I never let Brett Favre, Aaron Rodgers even get 2 years within free agency. And of course, Murray's on a 1-year deal, so it's much different. But as soon as you see something where Kevin O'Connell says that's our guy, go get it. The money's not getting cheaper with that position. It's only going up, and that will be a difficult negotiation. But earlier the better. And Rob Brzezinski, geez, he was he was already there, I think, by the time I got there in 1999. So Rob's a lifer. Rob's so good at what he does, and I've known him forever.
How do you think that the team will set the bar for how good Kyler Murray has to be in order to make him the long-term quarterback? Because I'm sure every salary cap person ever is like, can we just draft the young quarterback and have him on his rookie contract like Patrick Mahomes was? And then, they had that great team around him. How do you decide as a group, like what goes into that of here's how good this has to be in order for us to spend the money?
Well, this relates to something you haven't brought up, which is on every Vikings fan mind, which is the young quarterback that they do have. And, there needs to be a decision there. I mean, again, no decision's been made, still young in his career, but is that the guy? Are you going to give him another chance? Are we going to invest in a veteran again, whether it's Murray or someone else? This is, I always say this, and I say it in the book, the price of free agency is the cost of not drafting well. The reason we went and signed Charles Woodson, we missed on a couple corners in high rounds. The reason people signed free agents, they missed on that position in high rounds because those were the people that are supposed to create that stardom in your team. And, that's going to be the key. Like, where's this quarterback going? The media and fans are quick to dismiss. Teams are not as quick to dismiss, especially high round players at that premium position. So I'm, sure the Vikings will give him every opportunity as a backup to prove himself. And Murray will, these quarterbacks get hurt and we'll see what happens. But that's the key to the future.
Andrew, you have so many amazing stories in the book. I implore people, even, you worked for the Packers, but it's such great insight into just how the NFL works, how the business of sports works, that it's absolutely awesome. But I wanted you to end your appearance here with something about Adam Vinatieri. The guy goes into the Hall of Fame and then a legendary speech at the Hall of Fame, but maybe the greatest, most clutch kicker of all time. You represented him, which is amazing, and got to know him closely. I'm just always fascinated to hear about the greatest of the great, like that 1% of 1%. What did you learn about him? And the Vikings, by the way, have the best kicker in the National Football League at the moment. So what did you learn about him from representing him, and how cool was that for you to see a guy that you know so well go into the Hall of Fame?
Yeah, I was there 2 weeks ago in Canton with him, and we laughed about the story, which I'll share here from the book, that no one ever knew before I told him the book. And he was almost a Packer, and he was this close to being a Packer because he was a free agent. A lot of people don't know that. I brought him out to Green Bay. Why not? I'll make a little money for him with New England. I'm like, come here, let the Patriots know, and I'll make you some money. I'm a friend. So he comes out to Green Bay, and he's like, no. I want to leave the Patriots. I'm ready to leave. And I said, really? He goes, yeah. So we work out a contract. And then he goes to bed in a Green Bay airport hotel, calls me at 7 a.m. He goes, I'm like, what? He said, Polian called. I'm like, Polian? He goes, yeah. Colts. I'm like, what's the money? What's the money? I'll deal with it. He said, no. It's not money, Andrew. It's a dome. It's a dome. It's like, I love Lambeau Field, but I'm not kicking in Lambeau Field when I have an opportunity to kick in a dome. It's going to add years to my career, which was obviously so prescient because he kicked for 14 years after 10 years in New England. And I'm like, I get it. I get it. I get it. And, that's just one of those things where he wanted to leave the Patriots, which I was shocked to begin with. And he would have come to Green Bay, but a dome. And he was right. You just said you have the best kicker in a dome, right? That is so key for kickers. And, we had lost Ryan Longwell to the Vikings and a dome. It's just like, that's an Adam. And he's a great kid. I represent Adam. He's an undrafted kicker out of South Dakota State. Now that's kind of lowest you're going to find on the totem pole. And look what he became. So it was great to celebrate with him last week.
As you know, the Dakotas are also part of Minnesota. I don't know.
Yeah.
I didn't know that either until I got here. So he's sort of one of us. Andrew Brandt, again, Smarter About Sports is the book. I really, really enjoyed it. All the great stories. And I love the stuff that almost happened or things behind the scenes that went on. Who would have known that the negotiations with Charles Woodson took you like 36 days or whatever it was to get him to be a Green Bay Packer, which, Vikings fans obviously are not happy about the results with getting a Super Bowl with him, but so fun to read this book. I wish you the best with it, and thanks for coming on, man. I really enjoyed this.
Thanks, Matt. And again, Smart About Sports, Amazon's probably the best way, but I do have a website, smartaboutsports.com. You can get it there. Leave an Amazon review. Would appreciate that. And I hope you guys love the book. Thanks.